This is the Hagmann and Hagmann Report for today. It is a manic Monday. It is Monday, July 15th, 2013. This is a live broadcast. I'm Doug Hagmann, co-host along with my son Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. And for the next 3 hours, you're going to hear unbiased, uncensored news, analysis, information that you need to know in these perilous times. And, of course, we present the news more in depth than any other program, we believe, and we focus on news that it makes a material difference that's important to you. We look beyond the headlines and bylines and bring you the news, behind the white noise of all of the headlines that you're barraged with every day. For new listeners, and this weekend I want to thank everyone who's sent emails to us from Maine to Montana and beyond, and also from South America, from Europe, and even, of course, Taiwan, Western Australia, and New Zealand. I want to welcome you to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. We broadcast live each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find us on the Internet, our home base, HomelandSecurityUS.com. We're also simulcast by the good graces of the Christians United Broadcasting Network on their website, so you can find us there, live streaming at the Hagmann and HagmannReport.com. I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to thank you for your belief and for your trust in us as we walk through this minefield, this veritable minefield together. We're a listener-supported show. We also want to thank everyone from deep in our hearts who has helped us stay on the air through your financial support. And it's just amazing through your prayers, through your word of mouth support. Our show has grown exponentially, and we don't take that lightly. We take that responsibility very, very seriously. And I just want to say thank you. Joe, welcome to tonight's program. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, glad to be here. We have a great show lined up tonight. We're going to be joined by a special guest, Josh Hawley, in the second and third hour, who is a talk show host on Genesis Communications Network. One of the most dynamic and diverse public figures in the world today. With his skill set, he is truly a modern-day Renaissance man. That from the JoshHawley.com website. His show airs from 10 to noon Central Time, or Eastern Time, 9 to 11 Central Time. And I was on his show last week, and my father had a prior obligation, and he missed it. But he's going to be on the show today, and that will be a very good 2 hours. And
Joe, about that, too. We talk about some pretty heavy topics and pretty bleak outcomes. We know how things are going to ultimately end up, but to get to that end point, there's going to be a lot of trials, a lot of stress, a lot of mental machinations that we're going to have to go through. Josh is going to help us a little bit in that respect, and also give us his take on things as well.
And he does have a very interesting take and a different take than most on a lot of stories, as we were talking on the show last week, and we were going over different important current event issues that we were seeing, and we were kind of breaking those down, and it was fun being on his show, and I know it'll be fun having him on.
Yeah,
so it's something
definitely going to be interesting.
Well,
I just want to start out, ladies and gentlemen, by saying this. Over the weekend, if you go to, folks, please do me a favor to the listeners. If you go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, we have put up, beginning with the article from Friday, July 12th, or Saturday, I believe it was, July 12th. It was Friday, I'm sorry. A guest article from Daniel Holdings. Folks, you recall Daniel Holdings, the author of As the Darkness Falls. He wrote an article about perception, and he used the Titanic as an analogy. And, of course, it's a very great article in terms of your perception about current events. And, of course, beyond that, on the 14th of July, I published an article, America Under Tyrannical Rule, What We Must Now Do. folks, that article was published, again, at HomelandSecurityUS.com, also at CanadaFreePress.com. And that contains some information about how we can seek redress for the crimes committed by the United States government, because our options are being limited. Now, I'm going to come back to this in a moment, because there are some things I'd like to clear up about that particular set of instructions, if you will. And of course, Doug Ross emailed me on the 14th, and he, in response to that article, he said, how's this for a bill of particulars? And he had put together a list of Obama's firsts. And you've got to check out his list of firsts. If you click on the read them all at this link to the article, it's interesting how that the compilation of Obama firsts. I didn't realize some of the you hear things, but you really don't put things together quickly, or there's just so much. And Doug Ross did really a great job in putting things together in terms of Obama. And then, of course, there was a homework assignment for those listeners who wanted to accept it. I'm not sure how many people actually watched the film, watched the video associated with the photograph, or the picture that's on the website under the heading Money versus Currency, Understanding the Difference. And the picture, for those listening and who haven't seen the website, it shows on the left-hand side a picture of it shows a pile of Monopoly money. And then in the middle it shows a pile of Federal Reserve notes. And then on the right-hand side it shows a gold coin. And the question is, which of these is not like the other? I'd urge everyone to take 25 minutes of their time and watch the video that accompanies that report, and also pay very close attention to that portion which deals with that topic, because I thought it was great how that was presented, and in particular how that when they compared the PhDs with the children and how they thought, I thought, wow, man, isn't that fabulous? But one article in particular, and I'm going to really want to focus on this just for a moment here. While the entire nation was really geared, looking at, involved, mesmerized by the George Zimmerman trial and the death of Trayvon Martin, folks, how many of you knew that a law firm representing two whistleblowers, actually, but one specifically from the U.S. State Department Inspector General's office, was burglarized on the 29th and 30th of June? Twice in 2 days. The details are in that article, but I've got to tell you, this is the Watergate of whistleblowers that, in my view, could bring down Hillary Rodham Clinton. It could lead directly to the Clinton State Department. Now, obviously, she's not in that position any longer. But if you read the article, and I would ask everyone that's listening to this, because here to not only read the article, but also click under the article, share on Facebook or like on Facebook, because what that does is it spreads it across the social networking platform, or tweet it out, or share it, however you want to do it. I'm not looking for publicity in this. What I'm trying to do, what we're trying to do together, Joe and I and others, we're trying to get the word out, we're fighting this machine, this oppressive corporate media machine. And this information is getting buried by other headlines. We need to get this information out. This burglary that took place on June 29th and 30th is extremely significant. Yeah, I cannot tell you.
So far under the radar. So far under the radar in importance and what was actually covered in the news media. There were some references to it here and there, and it was mostly on some print and internet media more than anything.
Well, yeah, it was. Now, CBS did, I think, just a very limited version of an investigative report on this, but didn't touch anything or didn't go far enough by any stretch of the imagination. What happened here at this law office would be compared or could be compared, well, far beyond, exceeds well beyond anything that happened in Watergate during the Nixon era. Imagine being a whistleblower, hiring an attorney because no one will listen to you. The whistleblower. You talk about a whistleblower. Her name is Aurelia Fedninson. Yeah, I got that last name right. She was a long-time investigator for the Department of State in the Inspector General's office, the IG office. Now, her duties included investigating fraud, corruption, and mismanagement that could constitute either criminal wrongdoing or internal violations of State Department regulations. She oversaw some 260 embassies and diplomatic outposts across the globe. Well, she did her job so well that she found numerous instances of alleged wrongdoing. She reported them, and the allegations were covered up at the highest levels of the U.S. Department of State. Now, think about this. Your job is to uncover wrongdoing. You find criminal activity, you report it, and you are then punished for it. Now, I'm not talking about any type of criminal activity. I'm talking about criminal activity that includes prostitution, sex crimes involving minor children, diplomats that skirt their surveillance, their security detail, and get involved in prostitutes. That, of course, opens us up. It's not the sex so much as what it opens the United States up to, and so on. This is exactly what we're talking about. So, while the Clinton, at the highest levels of the State Department, while Hillary Rodham Clinton was the Secretary of State, she said, no, we're not going to do anything about this, and she threw it under the rug. So this Ariella hired a law firm. Okay, the law firm was in Dallas, where she lives. The law firm of Schulman and Matthias. Well, it just so happened that on the 29th of June, at 8:30 at night, a man and a woman walked into the building, which is law firms located on the 5th floor of this very large office building. And the office building is located in this office park. They took 3 computers. They pried open the file cabinets and took boxes of files. But not just any files. Files that contained information about the wrongdoing, about the wrongdoing at the Department of State. But it didn't end there. You see, at 3:30 the next morning, the male component of this burglary duo returned and carried out yet another box, contents unknown, suspected to be additional files. But here's the thing. They walked right by silver bars exposed in the drawer. The drawer was open, or they opened the drawer and saw silver bars, untraceable silver bars. They didn't take them. They found other items saw other items of value that couldn't be traced and didn't take them. So this was a burglary with a very precise intent. The intent was to take files and even the computers that held the information by the whistleblower. But it gets better. You see, James Rosen, and folks, if you're familiar with my NSA problems, the problems I have with the NSA, well, James Rosen was reporting on another aspect of the Department of State. In fact, he he interviewed or he reported on 2 Department of State officials, high-ranking Department of State officials, who in fact could be charged with perjury because they lied or evaded the truth so dramatically during their testimony. Their names: Scott Boltrowitz, former Director of Diplomatic Security Service, and Tracy Mahaffey, the Executive Director currently of Diplomatic Security Service. At any rate, the gentleman that is behind those 2 individuals who filed the complaint against the Department of State, and to which those 2 individuals responded to, is a man by the name of Richard Higbee. Well, Richard Higbee has a child that has a chronic and even terminal illness, and you see, Mr. Higbee, all he wanted to do was stay in the country, but he was, let's just say, he was being punished by the Department of State, and made to, or given the opportunity, either travel outside of the United States, take posts outside of the United States, or get demoted. Well, what would you do? Chances are you put your family first. So they demoted him. So interestingly, what Mr. Higbee did was grab an attorney, found an attorney, and filed a civil action against Hillary Rodham Clinton, acting in her official capacity as Secretary of State. Guess who? Guess what law firm represents Mr. Higbee? And you don't have to guess too far, do you? This is the very same law firm that is Schulman and Matthias, the very same law firm that is represents Miss Fedinson. So now, is this some sort of coincidence? I think not, folks. We are working hard, very difficult, not difficult, but we are working very strenuously to bring you the truth about this. The FBI is involved in this. Not that makes much of a difference for those of you who know that the FBI can be controlled, but the fact of the matter is, this is probably the most brazen, if not the most brazen, situation with respect to the wrongdoing, the documentation of wrongdoing by the Department of State that there ever could be. There's photographs from a video from Channel 4 out of Fox Channel 4 out of Dallas, embedded in the story, in the article at HomelandSecurityUS.com, as well as CanadaFreePress.com. So what I'm asking everyone to do, because of the sensitive nature of this, because of the, it seems like whistleblowers, and it seems like those people reporting on whistleblowers or wrongdoing, it seems that there is an issue where their lifespan and their health is sometimes cut short. But what I like everyone to do, so this is made into a larger story, is to certainly spread this among your social networks. Spread this article among the people within your social network, your spheres of influence. Please be nexus people for this article. Allow this to grab some traction. So go to CanadaFreePress.com, click on the link or click on the headline and read the article and share it via Facebook via the article. Same thing with HomelandSecurityUS.com. The reason I'm asking you this is not to spread my name out there, but to get this information out there so we can get some answers to this and hold Hillary Rodham Clinton accountable under the Obama regime. Hold these people accountable, because you talk about tyranny. This is tyranny. And by the way, see, being a whistleblower under this tyranny, under Barack Hussein Obama, it's getting a bit rocky. It's getting a bit dangerous. So we need to watch we need to watch each other's backs, and that's why I'm asking you to do this. We'll also be reporting on some very odd situations with respect to Michael Hastings, what he was involved in, and what could have happened to him, and go back in time because I think it was Thomas Jefferson, or I believe it was Jefferson, who said the further back in time you go. No, it was Winston Churchill. The further back in history you look, the further forward you can see. Meaning to say that our answers, especially with respect to some of the whistleblowers and some of the reporters and everything, can be found, or what can possibly happen, or what the plans are, can be found in what's already happened with people like Michael Hastings, and even if you want to include Mr. Breitbart in there as well, as I believe that was, as I now believe with a higher degree of certainty, that was a sanctioned assassination on Mr. Breitbart. But having said that, once again, I would urge everyone, please go to HomelandSecurityUS.com and CanadaFreePress.com. Make sure these articles get some traction because of the nature and because we need to get the information out there, and so we can watch each other's backs and keep everyone safe. Because I do believe that there's an element of danger here we're dealing with, and the danger is real. It is. I've already got some emails about this particular story from people I know that are associated with some websites that are Obama-related websites, and they're vulgar, they're vicious, they're vile. So obviously, we struck a nerve somewhere about this particular story. So just as an FYI. So at any rate, I just wanted to mention those things, because I think it's so important. And again, we're going to be talking more and investigating more about the Michael Hastings affair, the death of Michael Hastings, and the circumstances surrounding that. We're also going to be doing some retro work, if you will, into this week. By the way, is the anniversaries of the downing of TWA Flight 800, as well as the murder, not suicide, but murder of former Deputy White House Counsel Vince Foster under the Clinton administration. So that said, we can get into some current news, some other news as well that is important to get into right now. Joe, what do we got?
Well, first thing I would like to talk about, there was on Saturday, the verdict was released in the Zimmerman trial, and the verdict was not surprising at all. It was not guilty. And I'm pretty surprised at the reaction. It has been much less violent than I thought it would be, and that makes me very happy, although there are some problems in some areas. But it could have been much worse. But what we see now are people trying to continue to drum up those emotions and make people, as Al Sharpton, I think, one of these people, the MSNBC host, is calling for protests in 100 cities. And, I mean, they are going to drag this out. Not only that, now we have the Justice Department probing this case and looking at it as the New York Times article. Criminal case closed. Justice Department will restart hate crime inquiry. And none of this is going to change anything. This is what's so frustrating about all this. Taking even a side in this matter is distracting people from what they need to be focused on. This was the decision of the jury, and the jury decided based on the facts that were presented to them, and not protesting, not doing anything of that sort will bring back Trayvon Martin or change the situation one bit, except it will create further divide amongst people that now need to be coming together for what is coming down the road. And we see, you were talking about the whistleblowers, the people who broke into this weekend burglary, like the Watergate of 2013. These stories are important as we see what is going on behind the scenes here, what they're looking for, what they are trying to oppress, the information they're trying to oppress, and what they're trying to call, who are whistleblowers, what do they do? They're coming after the media, really, and that's not a surprise. But what is a surprise there are a few other stories here that have been overlooked.
Before you get into that, I just want to mention this. There's a lot of talk about civil suits related to the George Zimmerman case, Trayvon Martin case. According to the 2012 Florida statutes, now we know, folks, that this current regime makes up the laws as they go along, but according to the 2012 Florida statutes, I think Title 46, Chapter 776, regarding the justifiable use of force, grants immunity from criminal prosecution and civil action for justifiable use of force, meaning that if someone is found that they've used, that they were justified in the use of force, they are immune from civil action. Now, that does not in any way, shape, or form mean that the Obama regime the Obama regime could not rewrite the laws or ignore the current laws and go in there and allow some civil action to be filed. So just bear that in mind. According to Florida law, under the Crimes Code, Chapter 776, there is immunity from criminal prosecution and civil action for justifiable use of force. But again, will that take place? Who knows?
Hey, my problem here is the Justice Department trying to reopen this case, trying to make sure that, their investment, we should say, is going to pay off. And the evidence is not going to change. Maybe it will, I guess, since they're going to take it to the federal level. But we're going to play a clip here from David Webb. He was on Fox and Friends yesterday, and he says this is not a racial case. It was made into a racial case. And hopefully this clip plays through. It's 3 minutes. Here it is.
I can only imagine what these parents are going through. And when I think about this boy, I think about my own kids. My main message is to the parents of Trayvon Martin. If I had a son, he'd look like Trayvon.
President Obama making the case that what happened to Trayvon Martin could happen to any young black man in America. Well, George Zimmerman has been acquitted of all charges, but the NAACP says this case is far from over. They're now calling him.
And we have a premature
Of course
stop.
Not. But anyway, the point of this audio was talking about how the case was not necessarily there was a racial component in there, but the way the media turned it around and twisted the facts of the case, twisted the evidence in the case, and pushed as hard as they could to make sure that it was perceived to be a racial incident. The whole thing sparked by a Zimmerman dislike or hate for another race. Either way, this is not what it was. This is what the media made it to be, and people need to understand that by entangling themselves with these kind of stories and falling into the one side or the other side, you're not doing yourself any good. It's not taking active control of what needs to be done, and what you talked about in an article that you wrote, Dad, was what do we need to do? What we need to do. This was stemming from the America Under Tyranny rule, what we must do now.
Oh, yeah, I kind of skimmed over that. Folks, here is the situation in brief. The only solution, and I've spent hours talking with an insider from, we'll just call him an intelligence insider. I've spent hours talking with an intelligence insider. It's very simple. If those parties, such as the Tea Parties, the people who have been victimized by this oppression, let's just use the IRS for example. If you are a person who's been audited by the IRS or has been prevented from getting your 501c3 because of unnecessary IRS regulations, if you can find an attorney, and I think you can, and I'll tell you why in a second, that will file on your behalf a RICO suit. Now, RICO is an acronym for the organized crime code. Here, it's very simple. If persons in positions of trust and operating under the color of authority misuse their job or their office to deprive you of your civil, your personal, or your business rights, you can sue for damages. Okay, so suing for damages, you can sue them personally. And that's the beauty part of RICO. It's a civil suit, which, and the difference between a civil suit and a criminal action is a civil suit. You don't have to go through the necessarily the criminal justice system, of course. Now, think about this. If you are aggrieved, or if you are hurt by someone in authority and acting under the color of authority, and if there are two or more people involved in that action, and there will be, based on, we'll just say, the IRS situation with respect to either audits or the inability to get, your 501c3 or whatever, because of the having Tea Party in the title or Christian or whatever in the title, that you can file a civil RICO suit through an attorney in the jurisdiction in which you live. And by doing so, that will open up a period an area of discovery. It's quite simple in theory. Now, as the discovery moves along, chances are you will find, or there will be found, criminal activity there. That's something different and is something that can be expanded upon. But here's the nice part about this. The beauty of a civil RICO suit, is its very precise or surgical precision, if I might say. In the case of the IRS, you go after the specific agents who denied or delayed proper processing of a filing for tax-exempt status. That, of course, to the people applying for that, had both a direct economic impact and damages, and violated the filer's civil rights, which will cost real money to correct. Now, as I mentioned, during the discovery process, specific agents who engaged in these criminal acts and who were motivated politically could very well, and almost certainly would, identify their supervisors who directed their activities. We then begin to follow the trail of breadcrumbs and pull into the spotlight, to the light of day, each of the offending parties and all of the documentation that accompanies their actions. If it takes a year, it takes a year. If it takes 6 months, it takes 6 months. But the fact of the matter is, the longer it takes, the more people we will that will identify. The process is simple. It's very simple. It's very precise. And this is the way to go. And by the way, I mean, if persons in positions of trust and operating under the color of authority misuse their job or office to deprive you of your civil, personal, or business rights, the suit, by the way, allows you to sue for triple the damages, which provides a really interesting incentive for the law firms as well. They're interested in these kinds of suits. This is the beauty of the civil RICO action. I was reading the comments on Canada Free Press in the article about this, and many people, it's still on the front page of Canada Free Press, you just have to scroll down a little bit. And it's also on HomelandSecurityUS.com, the same thing. But the title of the article is America Under Tyrannical Rule, What We Must Now Do. That's the answer. And it's very simple because you can go after these individuals personally, and you can go after their assets, the agents, personally. You talk about a motivating a motivator to get people to talk. Holy cow! Because they're acting under a color of authority, and the method of filing, that being the civil, in the civil venue, it's a preponderance. It's a different type of evidence, whereas the criminal is beyond a reasonable doubt, the civil is preponderance of evidence. The bar is set lower in terms of proof. Remember the OJ trial. Remember that whole ordeal with that. This is the beauty of the civil RICO statute. So we have to get these people who have been wronged by, we'll say, the IRS in one case, which is probably the easiest and most visible aspect. Get them together to file a RICO or individual RICO filings through attorneys. It's not that difficult. If you appoint a special prosecutor, who will appoint a special prosecutor? It's going to be somebody from the government. It's already going to be corrupt. You're dealing with a corrupt system, a captured system. So go outside of the system is what I was trying to say, and go through a civil RICO filing. You're circumventing a corrupt system. This would be a very, very effective way to go. Folks, think about this. You can look into it. There's enough material out there about how to do this, and Tea Parties in particular, and those people who have been denied their tax-exempt status because of their names, the names of the organizations or whatever, I would urge everyone to do this, to look into this. It's not that difficult, and it would cause a tremendous chill within the government. I can guarantee you that. It's not that difficult. Let's not make it as difficult as people want to. There are people actually commenting at Canada Free Press who are trying to make this much more difficult than what it is. And I have a feeling that some of those people are motivated not from a position of knowledge, but perhaps a political position. That's just my view.
All right. In other news we're going to hit here, we got about 20 minutes till the top of the hour. We have a story from Foreign Policy magazine here. U.S. repeals propaganda ban. Spreads government-made news to Americans. For decades, a so-called anti-propaganda law prevented the U.S. government's mammoth broadcasting arm from delivering programming to American audiences. Now, this is news to me that the U.S. government had a mammoth broadcasting arm, but it is not news to me at the same time, because we know that the governments and the people who control the governments control the media. But on July 2nd, that came silently to an end with the implementation of a new reform passed in January. The result, an unleashing of thousands of hours per week of government-funded radio and TV programs for domestic U.S. consumption in a reform initially criticized as green light for U.S. domestic propaganda efforts. So what just happened? Until this month, a vast ocean of U.S. propaganda produced by the Broadcasting Board of Governors, such as Voice of America, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty Mideast, and the broadcasting networks, could only be viewed or listened to at broadcast quality in foreign countries. The program varieties in tone and quality, but it's vast. It's viewed in more than 100 countries and 61 languages. The topics covered include human rights abuses in Iran, self-immolation in Tibet, human trafficking across Asia, and on-the-ground reporting in Egypt and Iraq. The restriction of these broadcasts was due to the Smith-Mundt Act, a long-standing piece of legislation that has been amended numerous times over the years, perhaps most consequently by Arkansas Senator William Fulbright in the 70s. Fulbright was no friend of the VOA and Radio Free Europe and moved to restrict them from domestic distribution, saying they should be given the opportunity to take their rightful place in the graveyard of Cold War relics. Moving on.
Well, before you go any further, the Smith-Mundt Act, just for people that don't know this was an act that was passed in the late 40s, early 50s. It specifies the terms in which the U.S. government can engage in global audiences. It's under the pretext of global public diplomacy. It was first brought into the equation. It was introduced as the Bloom Bill back in 1945, but it was not until, I guess it was not until 1948 when it was passed, signed into law by Harry S. Truman. And our National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2013 amended this, and our Foreign Relations Authorization Act of 1987, which allows for materials produced by the State Department and the Broadcasting Board of Governors to be released within U.S. borders. So, in other words, what we were pumping out, the propaganda we were pumping out to foreign countries, and I say propaganda, and mean by its very definition. Now the NDAA says, okay, we can take this and turn that propaganda inward to the American people. So think about what this is doing. This is important.
Now, an interesting name that comes up in this piece here. One example included a report by the late BuzzFeed reporter Michael Hastings, who suggested that the Smith Modernization Act would open the door to Pentagon propaganda of U.S. audiences. In fact, as amended in 1987, the Act only covers portions of the State Department engaging in public diplomacy abroad, the public diplomacy section under the R Bureau and the Broadcasting Board of Governors. But the news circulated regardless, much to the displeasure of Representative Tom Berry of Texas, a sponsor of the Modernization Act of 2012. He says, to me it is a fascinating case study in how one bigger party, how one blogger was pretty sloppy, not understanding the issue, and then it got picked up by Politico's playbook, and you had one level of sloppiness on top of the other. It goes on to say, and once something sensational gets out there, it just spreads like wildfire. But here's the problem. There are pieces of news that do contain information. Now, what the people do is take that information, the truth of that information, and they pretty much trample it down to nothing. And through their dissenting views, different media outlets, we can give examples. Drones. Some people will say, well, we know drones are in the skies. But how many different opinions of why they're there? Same as chemtrails. There are chemtrails in the skies, but you have all sorts of different media outlets reporting on different reasons why they are there, never getting the truth and the heart of the matter, but all agreeing that they're there, disagreeing on the reasons they're there.
Well, exactly. What they do is they take a kernel of truth and smother it with a layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of lies. Whereas that one kernel of truth carries the lies, and you look at it and you don't know what to believe. But with the removal of the protection and the inward now focus of this propaganda, folks, this is so very important. You're not going to hear about this, generally speaking. You're not going to hear about this elsewhere. Again, this is now taking the Smith-Mundt Act and turning it inward via the National Defense Authorization Act for 2013, or the NDAA for 2013. So now they're saying, okay, anything you want. Voice of America, for example, Radio Farda, Radio Free Asia, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, whatever. It doesn't matter. Whatever. You can turn this information onto the American people, and then you can use this as a tool for propaganda. And I've got to tell you, there was, at the time that this was discussed back in the 40s, there was this talk about, we've got to there was talk about this being Nazi-style propaganda, and now they had to remove that stigma. But the fact of the matter is, this is propaganda is propaganda is propaganda. If it's untrue, it's untrue. But folks, do you realize what just happened here? It's kind of like the Telecommunications Act of 1996. You had a whole slew of different independent radio networks, and now you're down to, what, 5, roughly? Okay, so now even more, you are being controlled. The information is being controlled by the NDAA of 2013 via the repealing of this act.
Even before that.
So that
the news that is put out for the alternative media to the mainstream media all seems to be, to a certain degree, a distraction in its own regard. And I was kind of surprised by Drudge this weekend with the flurry of live feeds put up on the Zimmerman case from Miami to Sanford. They had all these TV just feeding into that frenzy of.
But what drives that is the fact that Drudge, it's revenue driven. It's revenue driven. Folks, follow the money. It's not that difficult. What drives Drudge to put up the headlines he puts up? It's revenue driven. Okay, there's an element of public interest. He'll take a story of public interest, whether it's the death of Michael Jackson or the indictment of Jackson or whatever it might, would have been at the time, and weigh that with what drives people to not only to his website but to the links. Don't forget, Drudge is just a news aggregator site, whereas we don't aggregate the news. Drudge aggregates the news. In other words, it's just a listing of links to news stories. So he's going to be responsive to the news stories that people, number one, are interested in, and number two, that are revenue driven. So it's all about the money. Follow the money. Follow the money. That's what it is.
Right. And the best way I can describe the Zimmerman case is the use of emotions. Imagine we talk about how the governments have used the Hegelian dialectic problem reaction solution. They have, through the NSA stories, the metadata story came out of how they map trends and how people will react to certain situations. Now think of the governments knowing a story is going to go out, knowing a policy is going to be implemented, and already having everything on the other side of that answered. They will already know how people are going to react in a place. Basically, there's not a lot of risk involved when you know the outcome of a situation.
No, and they hedge it by financing all sides of the players in that equation. And folks, the perfect example of this, what Joe's talking about, I think the most perfect example I can think of right now is they are going to kill the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar is going to be killed. The fiat currency, if you looked at the video that explains money or currency versus wealth, currency versus money, that is, you'll understand. There's never been a fiat currency that's ever outlived a certain period of time. I mean, it's just it never. But they're going to kill the U.S. dollar and replace it with yet another fiat currency based, or perhaps another fiat-based currency, or a special drawing rights type currency, SDR, or even a digital currency. But see, that's already what Joe's talking about the Hegelian dialectic. They've already have the solution for that. They're just waiting for the right time to pull the plug, and whether it's sudden or whether it's incremental, it doesn't matter. They already know what they're going to do. They're 6 steps ahead of us. They're 6 chess moves ahead of us.
And each of these pieces of news can be looked at as little pieces, no matter what the news is, from the NDAA 2012 signing to the Patriot Act. We all look at these and focus in on these as a whole, but they're little pieces of information. you can't see the whole by looking at one of the pieces of information. We have to step back and look at the big picture of what's going on, as the way they do. They look at the trends and the outcomes of what happens based on what they put out. You know, the gun grabbing situation led to what? Guns rising in price, record sales, record ammunition shortages and sales, and yet the Second Amendment still hasn't been taken away. In some states, it's been redone to limit abilities of certain types of weapons, but all that hype for what? I mean, and this is a trend that we see in the news constantly, so we have to learn how to dissect this all properly. What is a distraction, what is not a distraction, and most importantly, use what we know from the Bible and ask ourselves when we're going through these things, what will help our eternal situation? Will anything in this news story let us help somebody else, or help ourselves in an eternal situation, or help other people here on earth? And going about it that way, we can have a much better outlook and outcome on a lot of the news stories if we all went through this process together.
Well, yeah, and I think that that's how we should live our lives in general. I mean, we all have to adhere to. I mean, we've got a moral compass. We've got we have to walk in faith as well, and that's the other aspect of this too. In fact, Josh Tully, I'm sure we'll talk about this at some extent, or to some extent. We're not here when we provide information, for example, about the collapse of the dollar, the killing of the dollar, and thusly the collapse of the economy, and there will be people that will starve. Because think about this. I mean, our dollar is a U.S. reserve currency. You think that's going to affect us? It's going to affect other countries as well, and much harder because of the cost or the inability for them to buy things. But having said that, the fear element, we cannot walk in fear. We're not here to spread fear. We're here to provide information, actionable intelligence, that we'll call it, so you can make the proper decisions. Because making the proper decisions, as opposed to burying your head in the sand and not making the proper decisions, could mean life and death for you, or comfort and discomfort, or levels of comfort or levels of discomfort. But it's also the responsible thing to do from a biblical, from a Christian, and even if you want to bring this into the equation from a patriotic or the American ideological standpoint as well. Okay, so this is what we have to do. We cannot forget that our Constitution, just like our Bible. I mean, our Bible is a human, in my view, it's an instruction book for how we should, right. And so, the Constitution is a blueprint for the laws of our land, and both have been perverted equally. Well, maybe not equally. I think the Bible has been perverted much more than the Constitution, but the Constitution has really been perverted. So, what does that tell you about the Bible? But that said, we all have to work together to the same goal.
Yeah, and now some interesting news on the economy. This from the Treasury: the debt has been exactly $16,699,396,000,000 for the last 56 days. According to the daily Treasury statement for July 12th, which the U.S. Treasury released this afternoon, the federal debt that is currently subject to a legal limit of $25 million more than it's at right now remained at this $16,699,000,000,000 level for the past 56 days.
Wait a second, Judge. Somebody lean on the switch. Is somebody got their elbow on a button somewhere?
Yeah. For 56 straight days, the federal debt limit has remained $25 million below the legal limit. Even though the portion of the federal debt that is subject to a legal limit has not changed in almost 2 months, the Treasury has continued to sell bills, notes, bonds at a value that exceeds the value of the bills, notes, and bonds it has been redeeming.
Interesting.
The public debt subject to limit, as the Treasury calls the portion of the federal debt that is legally limited by Congress, first hit this mark at the close of business day on May 17th. Up to that point, in 2013's fiscal year, according to the Daily Treasury Statement, the Treasury had already redeemed approximately 4.7 plus trillion in U.S. debt instrument bills, paper money, that had matured. At the same time, Treasury had issued $5.3 billion in new debt instruments. That means, on net, as of May 17th, a part of the federal government's debt publicly circulated in instruments like bills, notes, bonds had increased $577 billion for the fiscal year. Thus, over the past 56 days, the net value of U.S. Treasury Secretary circulating had increased by $51.586 billion. How could the value of the an extent of the U.S. Treasury Secretaries increased by $51.6 billion during a 56-day period when the federal government's debt, subject to the legal limit set by Congress, remained constant at the $16.699 billion or trillion mark, just $25 million below the legal limit? Now, what would be the consequences of this? It goes on to say that a letter Liu warned Boehner that the Obama administration would not negotiate with the House to curtail spending in exchange for giving Obama new authority to borrow additional money. So this is just more market manipulation. This is the Treasury battling with, the Congress, apparently, is what it appears to be. But the government has until September 30th, when this expires, to create a solution. And it goes on to say that Treasury Secretary Liu warned we will not negotiate over the debt limit. So we are looking at a odd situation, as I'm still trying to wrap my brain around this whole story. I read it once before we went on air.
But look, I think it's a difficult concept to really get into. But here's the key, I think, and I think that V, the guerrilla economist, had said it properly. You've got China. You watch China. In addition to everything else, watch China. Watch what they're doing with gold. Watch what they're doing with silver. Watch what they're doing with the. Pretty soon, you're going to see China as having the world's reserve currency, and that goes back to, again, what V and Steve said. And folks, you can find those broadcasts in our archive section if you just go to our archive. But it's important to listen to that because China is a key component in all of this. But we could talk about GDP, we could talk about the debt, we could talk about a number of different things. The financial, however, or the economy, however, is already in a financial crisis. And when it comes to economic data, that none of this economic data is real. It's all being massaged, manipulated, and none of it's real. When you've got gold and silver that are artificially held down in terms of their value, and you've got the stock market that's artificially maintained through high-frequency trading, you're already, it's a Ponzi scheme. We're involved in a Ponzi scheme. That's all we really have to know.
One more piece of news before we take our break and get to our guest, Josh Tolley of The Josh Tolley Show. Brain scans of inmates turn out possible link to risks of reoffending. True brain crime, or thought crimes here. It began with a casual question that neurologist Kent Kale posed to the postdoctoral fellow in his laboratory who had been conducting brain scans on New Mexican prison inmates. I asked, does the ACC actively participate in the risk of reoffending? Keel recalls using scientific shorthand for the anterior cingulate cortex, a brain structure associated with error processing. He goes on to say, we cannot say with a certainty that all who are in the high risk category will reoffend, just that most will. It is a very big implications for how we think about treatment and rehabilitation. Now, this study goes on to talk about the different types of brains and how they, their indicators that are given through the imaging, but they go on to say that these can one day be considered in civil commitment proceedings where convicted sexual offenders can be held indefinitely if it is believed they have a propensity to reoffend.
See, and the important thing here to realize, ladies and gentlemen, is you're getting into an area now where you're looking at the pre-crime a pre-crime or even a thought crime based on perhaps pseudoscience or even junk science or maybe even real science. But the fact of the matter is, before even a crime is committed, they can look at the rates of recidivism and so on. So it's a dangerous, very, very dangerous area to get into. And you talk about 1984. This is 1984 on steroids. That's the important part of this. Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann Report on this, the 15th day of July 2013. I'm Doug Hagmann. With me is my son, Joe Hagmann. Together, we're the only investigator / investigator, son and father-son radio show on the internet. Glad to have you with us. Stay with us for Mr. Josh Tolley, his website, JoshTolley, TOLLEY.com. Coming right up after this message. Hi folks, Doug Hagmann here. You might know me as the co-host from the Hagmann and Hagmann Report, or as a frequent guest on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. If you're like me, you're tired and confused over today's headlines. You just don't know where to turn for accurate, concise information about really what's going on, what's truly going on in today's society. If you don't know where to turn for accurate, well-researched, and properly vetted news, I've got a suggestion. In fact, it's a requirement. Bookmark Canada Free Press. That's CanadaFreePress.com on the internet. It's just not for Canada. It's for news across the world. Judy McLeod, founding editor, has put together a vast array of talented writers like Kelly O'Connell, Daniel Greenfield, Dr. Eilita Johnson-Powell, a lot of guest columnists, very talented writers. Folks, that's Canada Free Press at CanadaFreePress.com. Now mobile friendly. Follow on Facebook, because without America, there is no free world. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm just so proud to have with us as our sponsors, American Survival Wholesale, AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. They've got a 1-year emergency food plan, which is a pay-as-you-go type of deal. I like it because, you know, who has? I mean, there are people that have money saved up, but really who's got a chunk of money to pay out all at once for normally freeze-dried food and long-term storage food? My goodness, you could spend thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars depending on the size of your family. So what American Survival Wholesale has done, they've realized that most Americans, and most people, if you're listening to this, it doesn't matter which country you're in, you're probably on a budget. And they partnered with the Ready Project, which is Linden Farms, lindenfarms.com, that's LINDON farms.com, to bring this unique option for all of our listeners, specifically to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. This is a special for our listeners. You've got to mention the Hagmann and Hagmann Report to take advantage of this. They're providing the absolute value on healthy emergency food. But at the same time, they're working within your monthly budget. Here's the deal. You'll receive one Linden Farms 360-pack food every month for 12 months. And they'll ship it to you for nothing, for free. Now, you can't beat that with a stick. Now, every month, your cost goes down by $12. The first month's shipment is for a 30-day supply of food. The best quality food you can buy is $360. The second month, of course, it goes down by $12 every month. But the best part of this, there's two good parts. The first best part is the 12th month is free. That's pretty cool. To me, that's an amazing deal. The second best, if you do have the desire to purchase the entire year up front, and this stuff is good stuff. I could serve it to my family, and they would not know that it was long-term storage food. But if you do choose to purchase this up front, $24.95. That's it for a year. It's a great deal. Take advantage of this, ladies and gentlemen. It's American Survival Wholesale. It's AmericanSurvivalWholesale.com. That's where you go. You go to the store, and better yet, send them an email. bugoutamerica@usa.com. That's bugoutamerica@usa.com. Send them an email for ordering and other details. But do it today, folks. We don't know how long we...
Now by our very special guest, talk show host, Mr. Josh Tolley. You go to his website at joshtolley.com. That is Tolley. Josh Tolley has a groundbreaking radio program which broadcasts to a combined market over 5 million people. He is on now on Genesis Communications Network. He has a humongous bio where he is what's the term? Jack of all trades. Is that how it goes?
Yeah.
He has a lot of great information from fitness and health to insight on different things that are happening in our world. And I was had the pleasure of being joined on his show.
I just want to say this, Joe. Look, if you go to joshtolley.com, that's JOSHTOLLEY, joshtolley.com. If I took my shirt off, I'd look like that too. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, no, that's funny. Really, no. With that, Josh, it's glad to have you on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report again. It's been a while since the last time you were on, but a lot's been going on, and I wanted to thank you for having me on your show last week. I know my dad couldn't make it, and this can give you a chance to even ask him about some of the Benghazi stuff you did have questions on if you'd like to. But where to begin? Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and about your show and what you have going on?
Well, thanks for having me on. It was great having you on, Joe. Doug, I'm glad everything's going good with you too. Yeah, I don't know where to start with me, really. I mean, I started a business at 18, and then that kind of turned into 2 and 3 and so on and so forth. And eventually somebody said, hey, can you teach other people how to do this? And then they said, hey, can you take that approach and teach us about other things like business and relationships? And I said, yeah. And then that turned into, hey, can you write a book? And then it turned into, hey, can you host a show? And here we are.
Well, that's
great.
Yeah, lots of experience, entrepreneur from the start. Out of all those things that you have started and finished and accomplished, what would you say is your best accomplishment, your biggest accomplishment?
I think what we're doing now with the show, how it's kind of growing into something larger than I ever thought it would, and the number of lives that it impacts. Because when you're in business, a lot of it is about, and rightfully so, it's about, can I be successful in business in order to pay my bills? But the wonderful thing about what we get the pleasure of doing is the more successful we are, the more lives we're touching. And that, for me, is by far the most rewarding thing.
I couldn't agree with you more. We are at a crisis point in our nation where the people are on the verge of making themselves obsolete in the equation of what happens to them as they care more and more about their own selfish personal interests than they do each other. And being in a position of being able to help others is something that is fascinating and excellent.
Yeah, Josh, I got to tell you, I've gone to your website. I mean, there's so much self-help there. There's so much. You focus on the individual as a person, the fitness, the nutrition. I mean, there's so much. Plus the personal motivation, I suppose, is a good way to look at it. But how, one of the reasons when Joe said you were going to come on the show, I was so excited because I got to tell you something. I mean, the news out there, if you look at the news, if you spend any time assessing the news and what's going on and how really bleak things are. Now, I mean, legitimately bleak. I mean, we talk about the economic situation and about how, I mean, my goodness, how our money is not buying what it used to buy because of the debasement of our currency and all of this. We talk about this every night. We deliver a whole boatload of bad news or news to people. Okay, I shouldn't say bad news, real news to people. And, it's easy to get overwhelmed by this and say, oh, man, wow. So I'm glad that you're on, because I guess one of my biggest things to ask you is how would you assist, and how would you tell others to handle the news, what to do? I mean, give us answers, Josh. We're looking to you for answers.
Well, I think a lot of it comes down to. I think a lot of it comes down to perspective, knowing who you are, where you are in time, and I think that's part of the mass confusion that we're seeing. I mean, everybody's worried about stuff. Most people don't even know what it is they're worried about. I mean, you have half the population who thinks the world's going to end in their lifetime, yet you ask them the address to the White House and they're not quite sure, and they think that we fought Mexico in order to win our independence in 1776. So half of it is just ignorance. So we need to get to this point where we start educating ourselves, and then understanding where we are and who we are. See, people actually ask me that question a lot, because I do a lot of, business training and success training, but at the same time, I don't really put a lot of that into the show that I do every day. So they ask me, how can you report on the news and still be upbeat? And the answer is because I know what I'm fighting for. When you know what you're fighting for, when you know what you're willing to die for, then you know what you're willing to live for. And if you know what you're willing to live for, then you know what you're fighting for. And people who have fight in them, they're never down or they're never overwhelmed. I mean, everybody's going to have down times, but they're never overwhelmed, because they realize that the fight is where the victory actually lies. Nobody sings stories about the victory parties. They sing stories about the fight itself. And even if you look biblically, they talk about the fight that they went through. They didn't talk about how they had a great Sabbath 2 weeks after they occupied the Promised Land. It's all about the fight itself. So as long as you realize that the fight is part of the process, you can embrace it as just part of life. I mean, part of what we're supposed to be doing. And then if you know how the last chapter ends, well, then everything else just seems like, okay, I know what the enemy is going to do. At some point, I can't even blame the enemy for doing what the enemy is supposed to do, because the enemy is supposed to do it, and the dance would carry out.
Interesting. Though you said that so smoothly too, by the way, and I think people should really stop and not necessarily parse what you said, but understand what you said. And I love it, because if you know what you're, say that again. If you know what you're fighting for, well, no, if you know what you're living for, you know what you could die for, or you're willing to die for. Say that again, because I thought that was great.
Because here's the problem: people don't have passion in their life. They don't have purpose. We don't have the marriages we used to. We don't have the careers we used to. We don't have the life calling we used to. And if you look at great transitions in human history, whenever people have fought for freedom and won it, they have always had something that they were willing to die for. And whenever you have something to die for, you have something to live for. And whenever you have something to live for, you have something to fight for. And, with a background in martial arts and years and years and years doing some crazy high-risk security stuff, I can tell you that the person who's willing to die in that fight usually won't, because they know that I'm willing to die. This is what I'm willing to fight for. And I mean, think about it for a second. The founding fathers, not just the people who signed the document, but I'm talking about everybody who picked up a musket in order to fight. They didn't really expect to win. And I think that gets lost in human history. They didn't expect to win, but they knew it was worth the fight anyway. They knew. I mean, Benjamin Franklin, if you adjust for inflation, would have been the first billionaire. He was good to go. There was no reason on earth that he had to risk his neck, literally. But he knew something bigger than him was worth dying for. And because of that, he created a legacy that hundreds of millions of people have enjoyed.
I've never heard it explained that way. And when you think about it, folks, think about what Josh Tully just said. By the way, folks, our special guest tonight, Josh Tully from the Josh Tully Show. You can go to his website. It's JoshTolley.com. We'll have a permanent link up on our website after the show tonight. But think about what he just said. Imagine I don't want to say a Bill Gates, but imagine a billionaire
living for others, fighting for others.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. Imagine that today. Josh, are we that far off though from the days of Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin? Are we that far off morally and spiritually today than we were back then? I mean, are there still people that are like our forefathers that have that spirit?
Well, I think there are. Recently I was asked to give a speech on the Capitol steps in Wisconsin, and I brought up this idea of, it's time to fight for freedom again. And the Founding Fathers knew that too. They knew that the Tree of Liberty would have to be renewed with the blood. But I think for the first time in human history, guys, we're seeing a change. See, the people who wanted to leave Egypt, they knew that it was worth everything to seek freedom. The people who are trying to lead a revolution in China, the people who led revolutions in Eastern Europe, they knew that they wanted freedom. The problem we have in the Western civilization now is a lot of us don't even want it. I mean, we really don't. And we're at this point where we're deciding, hey, I think it would be okay to be a zoo animal. As long as somebody takes care of me, feeds me, and tells me I'm safe, I don't care. And for the first time in the history of humanity as a species, the majority of us are not really fighting for that freedom. And I know the majority of people didn't fight in the revolution either. That's not the point. It never takes a majority to win. But for the first time in history, the people actually don't want it.
That's interesting.
And I think that's a problem.
And the way you said, living as a zoo animal, people don't realize that they are encased by their own cages that they create for themselves. And it is the lack of motivation, the lack of drive and creativity that add to this, as well as the other side where things are handed out or you are rewarded for pretty much not having those initiatives.
Oh, absolutely. There's no reason the economy is really bad. There's really not. There's no reason that laws are oppressive. I mean, there's no way, if we were an alien from outer space and we were looking down on Earth, the aliens would say, how is this even possible? There's 350 million of them and maybe 8,000 of the other team. How is the other team winning? And you brought up this idea of, why do they push through these laws that sometimes don't even pass? I mean, why this constant push? And the push is to change the mindset. Just like cattle in a farmer's yard. I use this example today on my show. If cattle actually got together and went up to the fence and said, hey, I weigh 1,600 pounds, you weigh 1,600 pounds, there is no way 4 pounds of barbed wire and 2 poles could actually hold us. If we walk east, nothing can stop us. But they've convinced themselves that they're locked in a pen. And wherever you are in the world, livestock will voluntarily stay in that pen. And we've become that same thing. We push this idea, guns are bad, guns are bad, guns are bad. Maybe the law passes, maybe it doesn't. The law itself passing is not the agenda. The agenda is to change the mindset of the people on the other end. And if you notice the polls, that has changed. If you go back to 1950s and take a poll on gun violence, the law hasn't changed. But if you take a poll on guns and gun violence, parents could take their guns to school when they were kids. I know my dad did. But now no law has been passed, yet the mindset is now 60% of us don't think guns should be anywhere in our presence. No law, but the mindset changed.
That's an interesting point that you bring up about the mindset. You're absolutely correct. I do recall, and listeners, I know some of you are old, just like me, old enough to remember, where you took your rifles, and actually, there was no problem with taking your rifles to school for after school shooting. I don't want to say competition, but practice. In fact, you could even get into clubs where they would teach you how to shoot and so on and so forth at schools. So you're right. It's the mindset.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well,
I can't believe I'm that old, by the way, too. But anyway.
And everything boils down to mindset. Everything.
All right. So how do you, Josh Tully, deal with what's going on today? Because I suspect you probably would be the model of how we should mentally handle everything that's going on. How do you deal with this? Just that way, right? Just the way you look at it, but there's more to it, I'm sure.
Well, actually, I don't think there is. I think it's a lot simpler than we've been led to believe. I think, let's take the economy, for example. I was listening to the first hour of the show, and you're right. There is bleak news in the economy, terrible news. But what is the economy? All the economy is economic activity. That's it. That's all it is. So if we engaged in economic activity, there's not a fiat currency, there's not a tax, there's not a regulation that can stop us. And they know that. So the push is never really to stop the economy. The push is to change the mindset so they convince us that we're not in control of it. That's why they even run market indicators like consumer confidence levels. Well, what is a consumer confidence level? It's the mindset of the people, and it actually dictates the prices of markets. So if the people actually realize, hey, you know what, we could be trading seashells and we could create an economy, we would realize then that control is really in our hands. Control is right here in our hands. It doesn't matter if it's fiat. It doesn't matter what law they pass. And they understand that. That's why there's a war against entrepreneurship, and there's a war against mindsets.
Okay.
Yeah, the war on ideas, the war on mindsets, as you said. And people have been trained to think in certain constructs. They have limits of themselves when really our potential for our ability to do things for ourselves is unlimited. But we look at it as very limited. We seem to focus as a human species on negative things.
Well, Joe, I made a joke about my age, about being old, and that's just a number, Josh. I mean, I know people who are well into their 70s, early 80s that would put me to shame. I mean, in terms of activity. And I believe too, and every person, Josh, every person I met like that had this magic, I don't want to say magic, this magnetic kind of outlook, this high-spirited outlook on things. So it's a mental state, very interesting. Very, very interesting.
Well, everything, if we really break it down, everything is a mental state. I mean, there really is no such thing as a border. There's really no such thing as a law. It's just a bunch of people who mentally agreed that this is a law and that's a border. Everything around you is a mental state. And I'm not trying to get metaphysical. I'm just, it is. It's just a mental state. And you talked about the power of collective people. Even God himself, why did he destroy the Tower of Babel and split everybody up? Because he knew. He said that, man, together they can do anything. I need to break this up. So that's exactly what governments have been doing since day one. They try to divide us on race. They try to divide us on income. They try to divide us on political theory. They try to divide the mindset as much as they can so we all don't agree. Because if we all agreed, they'd be done. They'd be done tomorrow. Then everything would be falling apart like a house of cards.
That said, let me get your take on this most recent Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman, this verdict and this overwhelming, this tsunami of white noise from the talking heads, the bobbleheads on television, on the radio talking about this. What's your take on all of this? I mean, obviously there's an agenda behind this, but what's your take on their agenda and the effect that this talk is having on what's taking place across the country, or what isn't taking place across the country?
Well, I think they were hoping more would take place. They were pushing really hard to make sure people were mad, to make sure people thought this was about race and all that sort of stuff. And what strikes me as odd is there are so many other cases that really do reek of bad intent, yet they don't cover them at all. And we have this situation where the media is trying to remind you that this is about race, this is about race, this is about race, in order to try to divide you. And think about it. I mean, we can chunk this down to, little edible parts when we look at people like Al Sharpton. Al Sharpton makes his entire living on the division. If there wasn't a division, he'd be done.
Yeah.
And it's no different than Don King. Don King pumped up a fight, legendary fight promoter. He would pump up that fight, get them disagreeing with each other just to create the division. And like I said, whatever they can use is fuel for them.
Yeah.
I just want to say this. I put up on our website tonight a story that's dated about the murder of a white couple by actually 5 black men, and it received no media coverage. Now, I know this story is dated, but Victoria, a friend of mine, and I say that that may not be totally accurate. An acquaintance, kind of a friend, Victoria Jackson. She used to be on Saturday Night Live. I don't know whether you remember it from 1986.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, she's a very staunch conservative among the Hollywood elite, among among the actors and actresses and what have you. And she brought this up and brought this to my attention. And you're absolutely correct in the sense that there is this, and she referred to, where's Al Sharpton, where's Jesse Jackson on commenting on this, even though the story is dated, but that got no traction. That story got no traction. So the agenda, obviously, that you're referencing, and that she's referencing, and that the divisiveness that well, I shouldn't say everyone, that the government is pushing in the Martin case. Wow, it almost seems. Why can't people see what's really going on here? Or do you think most people do see what's going on?
Well, I think most people don't see it. I don't think a lot of people take the time to think about how they think. And the Zimmerman case is a great example of that. You have a lot of people who are emotionally upset right now, and they're talking about it in media, on Twitter, at rallies. But over 500 children in 2010, over 500 children were shot in Chicago schools. And how many people showed up to protest? None. So if they were really thinking, if they were really emotionally charged up about violence, then they would obviously logically be going after where the violence is happening the most, yet nobody shows up. But at the same time, and they're talking about this idea of, okay, we have to riot, but the logic there doesn't make sense. You're rioting because an innocent person was supposedly victimized. So the solution to that is to victimize more innocent people? I mean, that makes absolutely no sense at all. So we can't say that these people are thinking things through, because they're just simply not. And if we had to look at the number one problem the world is facing, it's the lack of thought.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And no, wait a second. The lack of thought. You mean the lack of self-thought, or thinking for oneself, opposed to the collective, or?
I just mean processing thought, and we've become an animal. Fish don't think about, hey, I wonder if there's something outside the water. Fish don't think about, hey, I wonder if I hide behind larger fish that the predator fish might not get me. They don't have those trains of thoughts. They have the thought process of basic survival. And that's essentially what we've come down to. We think about, well, I need my job, I need shelter, I need somebody to take care of my problems in my life. Then I'll watch a little TV and I'll go to bed and wake up and I'll do it all again tomorrow. And for a lot of people, that's good enough. And then those who are supplying that paradigm tell those people, okay, you need to be upset by Zimmerman. And they think, oh, okay, I must be upset by Zimmerman. Even though if you took them aside and explained what I just explained to them, a lot of them say, wait a second, you're right. That doesn't make sense. Why would I victimize people in my neighborhood who are in my neighborhood who have done nothing wrong by destroying their business, lighting their car on fire, because I'm upset because somebody else was innocently victimized? So once you realize, hey, I'm not even thinking.
Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, I was going to say, once you realize that, we even have to take that mindset to those of us who are in the truth movement or liberty movement, whatever you want to call alternative media. Because for a long time, we've been told, well, it's all a war for your mind. And it's true, but we've been supplementing that with, as long as I have the information, then I'm fine. But it's not that simple. It's not that easy. Because the enemy doesn't care if you have the information. That's why it's so easy to find. They don't care. They just don't want you to act on it. They don't want you to become a thinking person and self-sufficient, and I mean beyond food. I mean the ability to create a happy life outside of their provided paradigm.
Okay. All right. So just having, obviously, what you just said, just having the information is not enough. Acting on that information. But how does one act? Okay, we're in this, to me, we're in this very, I don't want to say dangerous, but the very gray area here. We've got an out-of-control government. To me, at least to me, we're a captured operation in the sense that we've got tyranny, lawlessness all over the place. Now, we've got this information where we know what's going on, but how do you act on it? I mean, or maybe even how do you get your mind right first to act on it?
Well, I think that's a big part of it, getting your mind right first. I think what happens is, we have a tendency to wake up to the fact that we've lived in a lie and then embrace whatever is next as the truth. And I see that a lot in people who have woken up to the fact that we're now in a tyrannical government. The next apple that's offered to them, they eat that and say, well, this must be true. And we have to take a step back, and we have to say, okay, I need to figure out what's important to me. Not what's been told is what's important to me, what's actually important to me. That might be a relationship with a God, or, then your wife, and then your children, then your community. But even in the sense of taking that to the next level and living your life accordingly. I mean, we were talking about that tyrannical government. We were talking about the bad economy. Well, if we became active, if we started a push to start 3 million more entrepreneurial businesses, well, that allows us the fuel then to buy more radio stations, to buy billboard space. Because we've been kind of led to believe, well, the problem is they have all this media. And it's true, they do. But there's nothing stopping us from having it either. See, the rules of war say anything that is used as a weapon against you can be taken away and used as a weapon for you. That's why even though we're in a fiat system, we can still make $1 million of fiat currency, go to Joe down the street who happens to own that billboard on the side of the hardware store and buy that billboard with fiat currency because he doesn't know and he doesn't care. So we can use those weapons to provide a mode of transformation, a mode of fighting back, as it were.
Wow. So well said. And if you had to start, what part of it would you start cleaning up first? Would you start helping people's clean up their own thought processes? Would you help get rid of the oppressive government? Because there's so much that needs to be fixed
I think
situation.
Yeah, but I think what Josh says was you've got to get your mind right first before you can help others, and I think that's an important key element here. Josh, we get a lot of people who email us because of the nature of our show, where it's we report on the news, but they'll come back and say, "Well, you give us all of these problems, you tell us about all of these things, but man." Do you think one time, Doug and Joe, do you think one time maybe you can offer a solution for crying out loud? But what you're saying here is just that. The solution is get your own mind right, have a relationship with God, have a relationship, fix your relationship with your families. And by the way, this is another thing too, Josh, a very important thing, because we're getting a lot of emails about this too, where people realize tough times are coming. Tough times are here for many, many people, but tougher times are coming. and they're in a marriage or a relationship where their spouse is like, well, I don't quite see it. I don't really believe what you're saying. I think you're over. I think you're painting a darker picture than what it really is. How do you handle something like that? How would you, if you were in a situation like that?
That's a great question. That's a great question, and we get that a lot too. So obviously, it's something that everybody's thinking about, and it extends even beyond relationships. I'm trying to convince my brother, or I have this coworker at work. I'm trying to convince him. I think the problem is a lot of people who try to convince others are doing it with a great heart, great intention, but they're trying to impose a mindset, and I'm telling you, it all comes down to the mind. They're trying to impose this mindset. Now, a belief is an accepted truth. That's all a belief is. It doesn't actually have to be true. It's just an accepted truth. So if somebody has an accepted truth in their mind that the government is wonderful, and you come along and say the government isn't wonderful, well, people are going to have a natural reaction to protect themselves. So they don't even want to listen. And that's why people say, well, they just shut down, or they just say it doesn't matter. Well, that's why. Because they're trying to protect a belief. The only way you can change a belief without getting into a 4-day workshop with me or something, the easiest way is to have them ask the questions themselves. Because when people ask the questions themselves, mentally what you're doing is you're finding a path to a preset belief, a preset accepted truth, and then challenging yourself on whether it's right or not. And mentally, you don't have the same barrier. There's actually a name for the barrier, and I don't know if that's kind of deep for this, but they don't have to get past that barrier themselves. So, for example, let's take an issue of like a chemtrail or something. And you say to somebody, look up in the sky. How dense can you be? I mean, I've been telling you this for months. It's right there. And they fight it, and they fight it, and they fight it. Instead, saying something like this, I was listening to this radio show, Hagmann and Hagmann, last night, and they brought up this idea of chemtrails. I don't know that much about it. You're a pretty smart person. Can you answer a question for me? Some people think that it's up there because the air is cold and it just stays there. But if that were true, then in the wintertime, why can't I drive to work and then follow my path back home in the afternoon? And just leave it. Because now their mind is going to question for the next 2 days, wow, that's a really good point.
That's a great point. You got me thinking about this now.
But that's how you get people past that, especially in relationships. Because when it's a husband or a wife, they want to feel secure with you. That's the point. And as soon as you challenge their belief, the person they're supposed to trust the most just hit them at the most vulnerable spot. That's why couples fight about things like money, and that's why they fight about things like faith, and that's why they fight about things like these topics. Because your beliefs are the most intimate part of you. Your spouse is supposed to be the protector of the most innocent or intimate part of you. And then they come home and they attack it with love. I mean, they're trying to get you to do the right thing, but they attack it, so you naturally feel hurt. You want to defend yourself, and you can actually drive them to a position where they don't even want to listen. And in some cases, they'll even say, I don't care. They're going to stand by their point just so they don't have to agree with you.
Yep. Wow. Well, I was talking with a gentleman who I respect a lot, a former government official who knows a lot about how things are and how things will be, and he likened the population or people as, in fact, he called me. I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before. I don't recall, but he called me on the phone and said, "Hey, this is like people are walking around, and it seems like everyone has a battered spouse syndrome." Any thoughts on that observation?
Well, it's true, because it goes back to what I said. I mean, here in relationships, we have this position where in modern America, you have a husband and wife come together. They say, oh, I love you too, and then they start their life. And the husband goes off and does his career. The wife goes off and does her career. And they spend 30 to 40 hours a week away from each other in a position where they're developing those beliefs, because you grow as a human all your life. They're developing those beliefs around the people they work with. And if you tell me where you work, I can tell you how you vote. So they're developing these beliefs at their place of employment. They come home, they get the worst part of their spouse. That's when the dress clothes come off, the makeup comes off, the sweatpants come on, and you start complaining about the day. Yeah, the average American couple spends less than 15 hours a week together of alone time. So, of course, they're going to develop these beliefs. And then every time they talk, going back to what we were saying, because the other person developed contrary beliefs wherever they have been spending 40 hours a week, they're obviously going to hit those most intimate parts, and they're going to feel battered. And you're going to get this situation where once the kids leave the nest, you hear, well, I don't feel like I know you anymore. Well, what does knowing you really mean? Knowing you means I share your beliefs, because if I was a doctor, Doug, and I was looking at Joe's medical chart, I would know more about him than you. I would know his blood type, his bone marrow type, when he broke a bone when he was a kid. I would know more about him than you. But if somebody came up to me and said, do you know Joe? I would have to say no. And why? It's because I don't share any beliefs with Joe. We don't have a conversation. We don't have that connection. You see what I'm saying? So we're developing a relationship with the most intimate person in our life that has no basis to it. So, of course, you're going to feel like a battered spouse because, in a sense, you are.
Interesting. I like how you phrased or how you framed that whole idea. I do. Okay. I get this. So what's your prescription? You've got this wonderful platform, and I'll tell you what, folks, if you haven't had the opportunity to listen to Josh Tolley, he's got a YouTube channel too, by the way, the Josh Tolley channel, very easy to find on YouTube. What do we need to do right now, individually, collectively? What should we be doing in preparation? Whether times are going to get tough tomorrow, a month from now, a year from now, or whenever. What should our life be? I mean, if you were to mold us in your capacity, what you do, how would you start us out on a regimen of security, safety, and success?
Well, in order to do that, let's take a look at a couple examples. We can use the Founding Fathers again since we used them already. Here's a situation where they were being shot at by their own countrymen, where they were taking muskets to a war. So the outlook was bleak for them, too. They weren't allowed to own businesses. That's why there's actually a pine tree on one of the flags. It has to do with entrepreneurship, not freedom of religion. But they were facing those dark times. Yet they had wonderful lives. I mean, when you go back and you read some of the love letters between the Founding Fathers and their spouses, or them and their children, or even between each other, they got the most out of every day. And you saw the same thing with the captives of Egypt. I mean, here you have the Hebrew people who are 300 years into this thing, but they're still joyfully marrying each other. They're still joyfully having children. You would think that times could not get bleaker, and you would think to yourself, okay, I'm not getting married, I'm not having children. Yet they did it anyway. So we need to look at, well, why? What was the difference? I mean, even if things get bad, they're not going to get that bad. So why can't they have a happy life, literally in captivity, and I can't seem to have one in a tyrannical government that's run by a bunch of idiots? And the reason is because we've been convinced that the problem isn't with us. They've told us, okay, you don't like your life, then you have to fix it outside of your life. You need to fix your community. Oh, well, okay, you want to fix your community. Well, you can't do that until you fix the state. Oh, I see what you're doing. You're trying to fix the state. But let me tell you something. You can't fix that until you fix the federal government. And now they're floating the balloon, Doug, that you can't fix the federal government until we fix the global government. And the further we get out from what really matters, the further we get from actually finding the truth. We could have a global government utopia tomorrow. Ron Paul could have got elected or whatever. Whatever. But your life wouldn't have gotten better at all. So we need to get back to this expression. I'm in North Carolina. I arrived on an airplane, and the flight attendant on the way here said, hey, if in the event we go down, oxygen mask will deploy. Put yours on first, because if you're dead, you're no good to anybody next to you, including your children. Well, life works the same way. What happens when you have a broken person in Congress? They destroy Congress. What happens when you have a broken-hearted celebrity? They may make $10 million a year, but the little Pop-Tarts in rehab 6 out of 12 months. And it's all because we don't address what actually makes us happy. And we can't do that until we have what's called a vertical alignment. Most people don't know what they believe, and they don't place priority on it. I had a guy once tell me, well, my wife is the most important thing to me. And I said, okay, well, actions speak louder than words, right? Oh, yeah. Well, if your wife is the most important thing to you, why are you selling her for $15 an hour to her boss?
Wow.
And I know, right? But it's really true. And until we get back to fixing our circle, making our circle work first, we can't change anything. And that's why the liberty movement, whatever you want to call it, has been active for over 100 years, yet nothing has changed.
Yeah, we see the same divisiveness, the same problems with the so-called alternative truth media, even more so than you do in the mainstream media. There is an agreement on what people consider to be the truth for the most part, and then you have those that are fighting for their own personal agendas, for their own pride, for their own egos. And it all seems to be selfish-driven. It all seems to be narrow minds. Instead of looking at the bigger picture, coming together and being able to fix this, you have 100 people in a position of power where they can make change, fighting against each other for what's left of the people who pay attention to the alternative media.
Yeah, Josh, I got to ask you: is that? I mean, you're in the radio business, and one thing I've noticed too. Well, it's not really confined to the radio business, but one thing I've noticed is egos. Man, people come in with egos the size of Texas, and what's that all about? I guess regardless of profession, regardless whether you're an author, a writer of a column, or a radio show host, or whatever, it seems like there's a lot of egos that get in the way and drive action as opposed to cooperation. What's that all about?
Well, it's the same thing we were talking about, in fixing society, just on a much smaller scale. So you have somebody who's not happy really with themselves. They don't have this sense of purpose from God and purpose for life and contentment with family or whatever. So they have to expand to try to create that sense of I'm worth something. Well, unfortunately, when it's synthetic success, and I actually coined that term in an article I wrote, when it's synthetic success, it's just like a drug. A little bit might keep you for a while, but then you need more. And you need a bigger ego to make you feel worth again. And then, you're with that ego, and you still cry yourself to sleep at night, so then you need to expand it again, and so on and so forth until you get out of control, and then you start looking for other things to fill that, and down you go.
Interesting. Josh, let me ask you this. I mean, once again, folks, we're speaking with Josh Tully, very successful radio program, and of course, I want to direct you to his YouTube channel as well. There you can find a number of uploads, incredible information, and I want to thank you for bringing us all of this information. But I know Josh, I know we've got people out there who are hurting, or they feel that you can perhaps assist them. They might have questions. They might feel alone. They might feel, abandoned, or not abandoned, but they might feel like, heck, we've had people that have written us and say, man, I'm on my last. I've had it. I just don't know where to turn, what to do. I'm on my last rope, if you will. For the next segment, can you stay with us to maybe take a call or two to help people get in the right direction? All right. Yeah, as we get to the top of the hour here, we got a few minutes to the top of the hour. Tell us about your radio show and your what's going on, what's happening with your radio show right now, and what you're doing with your show.
Well, the show airs 9 to 11 Central Time, 10 to noon Eastern Time on the GCN Radio Network. We have stations all around the country. We broadcast terrestrially, so a lot of people pick us up on their car radio on their way to work. We also stream the show on live on the Internet. We have listeners in 150 countries actively. The show is growing at a tremendous rate. I'm actually in North Carolina right now because of the growth of the show. We've just added a streaming version so people can watch me do the show. We're expanding it to a third hour, and we're looking at taking it to television. So we're working on a lot of stuff, including a couple books that are coming up, and we always do seminars and classes and things like that.
That's beautiful. That's great. TV as well, and you're into, obviously, looking at you. You're into fitness, and I have to believe too that fitness, physical health, affects your mental health and vice versa. So you're into the physical preparations, physical health as well, correct?
Well, yeah, and I used to be into that quite often. I used to be a gym rat, to be honest with you, before I started the show. And once I started the show, things just kind of got hectic and chaotic, and I got out of shape. And people used to ask me, when are you going to get back into shape? And I said, what are you talking about? Round is the shape. And I used to, kind of just make these excuses. But you're right. I mean, your physical health has a humongous impact, not only on your mindset, but the mindset of others. Statistically, we know people who are fit, they don't get laid off as fast. They get hired quicker. They're more active politically. And it's just one of those things that we need to do. So I started this Get Fit with Josh program in order to do that, because for some reason the talk radio audience is a very out-of-shape demographic, and we need to be the most fit demographic because we're the ones with the information. We know what's going on. So I'm trying hard to change that stat within the talk radio audience.
Beautiful. And boy, thank you for saying round is a shape, because indeed it is. And folks, you want proof of that, just take a look at me. And for those of you listening, folks, Josh Tully is a speaker who's in very much demand. You talk about a business professional, somebody who consults business people, helps others. This is a gentleman who we are so fortunate to have with us, that has agreed to take a couple of your calls, so definitely get in line, 661-244-9839. That's 661-244-9839. We'll take your calls in the order in which they're received for Josh Tully. And if you can, make your questions pretty concise so Josh can answer them and specific to your situation. But Josh, I've got to tell you, I just I've been following your rise to fame, if you will. Fame's not the correct word. Your rise in the radio business. What do you attribute that to? Is it people are hungry for this mental conditioning, aren't they?
Well, I think, because to be honest with you, I don't talk a lot about this on the show. I mean, it's kind of like the undergirding. It's kind of like the foundation. Everything is built on it, and we address how it's important in every issue. But I think what it is bringing logic, reason, and strategy, big asterisk next to the last word, back to the issues. Because what I discovered is, liberal Democrats want happy families. So do progressives, so do conservatives, so do libertarians. And we are so far removed from what makes us actually happy that all of us are trying to fight the global problem every day, and that's why there's so many different variations of the answer. If we really get back to what we all want, there's not that much disagreement. And once you understand what it is you want in your personal life, there's not that much disagreement politically either, which is very, very dangerous for the people in D.C. Because as we continue to spread this message and to change the hearts and minds of the country, we're realizing that once you understand what's important to you and the people in D.C. are the antithesis of that, they have a problem.
Did we just lose you?
No, he's there.
Okay, all right. Thanks. My headphones cut out. I think I just bumped something. I apologize for that. Folks are listening to the Hagmann Report. Josh, we're up against the top of the hour break. We're going to take that right now. You're listening to the Hagmann Report on this, the 15th day of July. Can you believe it? 15th day of July already, 2013. Okay. I'm Doug Hagmann. With me. Oh, I know, man. It's crazy. Doug Hagmann with my co-host Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann Report. We're right back after these brief messages. Stay with us. Line up if you have a question for Josh. 661-44-939. Hi folks, Doug Hagmann here. You might know me as the co-host from the Hagmann and Hagmann Report, or as a frequent guest on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. If you're like me, you're tired and confused over today's headlines. You just don't know where to turn for accurate, concise information about really what's going on, what's truly going on in today's society. If you don't know where to turn for accurate, well-researched, and properly vetted news, I've got a suggestion. In fact, it's a requirement. Bookmark Canada Free Press. That's CanadaFreePress.com on the internet. It's just not for Canada. It's for news across the world. Judy McLeod, founding editor, has put together a vast array of talented writers like Kelly O'Connell, Daniel Greenfield, Dr. Eileen Johnson-Powell, a lot of guest columnists, very talented writers. Folks, that's Canada Free Press at CanadaFreePress.com. Now mobile friendly. Follow on Facebook, because without America, there is no free world. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you about our sponsors. Great people, Carl and Lori Granlund, Granlund Firearms. Go to GranlundFirearms.com. That's GranlundFirearms.com. If you're up in British Columbia, what a beautiful place to be. Just pay them a visit there in Campbell's River, the salmon capital of the world. So bring your fishing pole if that is what you'd like to do. But if not, if you're in the mood for, or if you're in the need for hunting rifles, survival equipment, survival gear, hunting gear, it's a hunter's paradise, by the way. That's Granlund Firearms in British Columbia. They update their gun stock list all of the time, and they've got some absolutely incredible prices on some of their guns, their long guns for hunting. And I would suggest before you go out and purchase any type of gun, any type of weapon, check their gun stock list. You can call them to verify the current availability and price. Of course, prices are subject to change periodically. But like I have said in the past, my goodness, had I known they had a beautiful Mossberg 590 for the price which they did, and I think it was pretty close to $100 less than what I paid for it. That's just one example of what they have. They've got a huge gun stock list, and it's off their website at GranlundFirearms.com. And of course, Carl, what a writer! You've got it for your library. Get the book Treed Beyond the River, Cougar Hunting on Vancouver Island. It's the second edition. It's filled with stories, new stories, and more pictures. Great book. And of course, I like their black deer-headed t-shirt. That's just me. They've got other things as well. That's Granlund Firearms of British Columbia at GranlundFirearms.com. That's GranlundFirearms.com. Go to HomelandSecurityUS.com. Click on the link to GranlundFirearms.com.
It's hard to imagine.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the third and final hour this Monday, July 15th, 2013. We are hitting hour number 2 with our very special guest, Josh Tully. You can find his website at joshtoley.com. Tolley is the spelling of the last name. He is an entrepreneur, an author. He has his own radio show, and that show is now, as he said, expanding to a 3-hour show, and he will be doing also some video live streaming in a new location. And we want to say congratulations to him on his expansion and his listenership, as his show is very informative. It is unique, as it has a way of looking at things with logic and reason and critical thinking skills that a lot of places and media outlets will not allow the news to be put out that way. Josh, are you back with us?
I am, and I just want to say, the show that you guys have and the expansion that you're having is not surprising either. I mean, you guys have a wonderful show, and when you were on the show, Joe, I said, and it's true, that ever since I got into radio, I don't get to listen to hardly any radio. It's kind of sad. But one of the shows that I do listen to, and I try to as often as I can, is your guys' show, because you guys have this ability to kind of delve deeper than other shows that cover even similar topics. I'll hear a guest on your show, and then I'll hear him on another show, and I'll get way more out of the conversation that you guys had with this person than the other host did. So, great job, guys.
Well, thanks, Josh. And coming from you, that's a really big compliment. One of the things we do, by the way, and we get both good and bad emails about this, is we like to let the other person, if we invite you on, people tune in to hear you or the guest, and not us. So we like to let them talk and let them provide their viewpoint, their information. It's at that point, it's not about us; it's about them and what they have to offer. So that's why a lot of times we don't say much when we have a guest on, and it becomes their platform and their way of providing their information. And sometimes we find, my goodness, they go into more depth with us than others. If we don't lead them in the questions or the conversation. So thanks. But thank you so much for the compliment. Really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And
you deserve it.
If you're up for taking calls, the number we're going to give out the number 661-244-9839. And folks, if you want to weigh in after you dial that number, you press 1. That gives us an indication you want to speak to the host. We have lines are listener lines also. So
yes.
You press 1, it puts you in the call-in queue, as opposed to calling in to listen. You press 1, it does not.
We had a full bank of callers, Josh, right before the top of the hour break, and I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden everything just winked out, came back, and we've got the callers are starting to rotate back, but it's a slow process
and
here.
We also have an interactive chat room as part of the show, and a lot of people are saying that the sound cut off, and then when the sound came back on, people were being diverted back to the very beginning of the show instead of to the live part, which is very odd. And the archive of the show will always, when these things happen, come out crystal clear, perfectly fine. And still don't understand the
weird
communication, how they really screw up the shows. And usually that tells us we're hitting on a topic that is a little too much truth for than they would like people to hear. And that is the case most of the times. Sometimes it's operator error, not usually though, and sometimes it is regular, just electronical problems on their end. But I would have to say this seems just a little too out of place, the way that the phone calls are dropped, the sound has dropped, and we have no problems, indications on our end, which is the weirdest part. Usually, if something's wrong, we'll get an indication on some level, whether it be Skype or through our studio, that there is problems. But anyway, with that.
Last time I was on your show, that happened too. I was getting buzzed by F-16s the entire time.
You're not serious. Okay. Blackhawks, or black helicopters. Barb sent a question in, by the way. She writes, look, we've got a lot of information, lots of proof of various issues, But really, what are we doing about it? What are we as a people doing about it? We've got a lot of people doing a good job of getting the info out there. The radio programs, but apparently knowledge is not going to stop. Having knowledge is not going to stop the agenda of those people who want to ruin this country, want to ruin our lives. In fact, they seem to enjoy some attention, according to Barb, and use it to their advantage. And so her question, and I think you covered this, but maybe to reiterate, why aren't we organizing effectively? Why aren't we chasing them down, if that is to be? Instead, they're chasing us down.
Well, I think that actually holds answers to two questions. One question I always get is, why isn't the alternative media persecuted more? And the reason is because until they actually teach on something that can change the situation, the adversary would love the negative to continue to get out there. It benefits them. If I was invading a country and the host media was saying, "Oh my goodness, we're about to lose a war," why would I shut them up? I'm like, yeah, keep on preaching. I mean, just keep doing it. So, that's part of it. And I think the reason we're ineffective, just to kind of expand on what we were talking about before, is we focus on these national issues and these global issues, and we ignore what's around us. If I were to give you maybe just a two-step scenario, one, fix your vertical alignment. Start living that out. Sell out to whatever it is. I'm not telling you what you have to believe, but if you believe that there's a creator, why would you not spend every ounce of your energy trying to figure out who it is and what he wants? So, make that vertical alignment. If you're in a marriage, you obviously want it to last. Nobody wants to get divorced. So spend that energy developing ways to make that marriage better. And once you start fixing your life, and nobody's going to be perfect, everybody's going to fall. I'm not perfect, for goodness sake. But once you actively pursue changing your life, then start changing your neighborhood. Don't focus on the White House, just your neighborhood. Start a weekly meeting, kind of like they have, neighborhood watch meetings. Start a weekly meeting to spread this information and change other people. Start saying, hey, look, we need to know the people in our neighborhood. Everybody knows that we're going to hell in a handbasket, but nobody knows who lives next to each other. That makes no sense at all. We know the name of every person who attended a Bilderberg meeting, but I don't know the guy 2 doors down. I mean, that's just strategically stupid. So
good point.
It is. I mean, just get to know your neighborhood and start developing that. And, I've been telling people, make it a weekly thing, cover different topics. Maybe 1 week, watch a good documentary. And then say, okay, we watched a documentary on how bad food is. What can we do in this neighborhood? And then amazing things start to happen. Once people know that somebody's willing to do something to change, it's like a call to action. Next thing you know, everybody wants to get involved in this call to change. And before you know it, in your neighborhood, one person's going to be growing produce, another person's going to be growing chickens, another person is going to be monitoring police activity with their scanner in the neighborhood, and you'll create a pocket of liberty. And that's how you change a nation. You create so many pockets of liberty that it doesn't matter what comes out of D.C. because it's not going to make an impact.
And there it is. Folks, there it is. How simple of a formula is that? And how much more do you need? Creating pockets of liberty. And then soon, what you have, you've got this the communities of liberty and the expansion of liberty. I love it.
And we talked about how each and every person has the ability to affect change, meaningful change, in their own areas, their families, their communities. Just so many are afraid to take that first step. So many don't have that self-confidence that is needed or the self-drive that is needed. And it is imperative in these times that we live in to try to live for others, to help others. It's not just to help others. It will help yourself in the long run. But we need to put our selfish, whatever your habits, whatever they are, aside and look at the bigger picture to serve a bigger purpose.
Josh, before we take a call or two, what's your book? You do have books. I missed the screen when it came past there.
No problem.
Sorry about that.
The book we have out right now is Quit Your Job or Die, Discover the Importance of Self-Employment. And it talks about how vitally important entrepreneurship is to this fight. We have a tendency on the right and on the left and even in the libertarians, whatever, we have a tendency to focus on how do we get more jobs, how do we get more jobs, how do we get more jobs. And in reality, that's the wrong answer to have. Employment is the most dangerous thing you will ever do in your life. Employment. Now, self-employment is a different situation. But we know statistically, if you're employed, your odds of having a heart attack on Monday morning between 5 and 10 are 5 times higher than any other day of the week. We know that stress is the number one trigger for illness, cancers, disease, but the number one trigger for that stress is employment. We know the number one cause for divorce, or the number one cause for affairs, rather, is affairs at work. Well, we kind of covered why that is. The wife gets to see a man chase his dream at work. She gets to be part of that pursuit of a dream. It's just natural that she would want to be with a man who has earned her respect. So when you really start looking at how dangerous employment is, you can even translate that into voting. Why do we vote on Tuesdays? They know. Why? They know that employees don't show up. If you had a mayoral race and the voting was on Saturday, you wouldn't be getting 5% turnouts. They vote during the week because, remember, initially the only people that were allowed to vote were landowners. Landowners is an entrepreneur. So they knew, hey, man, if we make this vote on November 2nd and it's a Tuesday, because voting's always in the middle of the week, less people are going to show up. And who are the people who are not going to show up? The people who actually need it the most, the employees. But employees are so involved with, I have to work for 40 hours, come home, go to bed, go to work, come home, go to bed, that they don't realize who's even running for mayor, what the water use bill is all about. And then they wonder, oh, my gosh, why did Hagmann and Hagmann have to cover this when we voted on it? I don't remember voting on it. Well, it's because you were too distracted by employment. So every area of life is hindered by employment, at least long-term employment.
Wow. Yeah, and by the way, folks, I'm still reeling from that. If your wife is, the most important thing in your life, then why are you selling her out for $15 an hour? Wow.
It's a completely different way of thinking of exactly what you're thinking of. The way he said it, and put a thought into your mind in a way you haven't thought about it before.
Exactly. Perception is everything.
Perception and critical thinking, yes. Mr. Tolley, we have a few questions from listeners. We're going to go to the phones, and we're going to go to Vernon first. Vernon, you're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report with Josh Tolley.
Hey, God bless everyone. How you doing, Doug and Joe? And Josh, it's a pleasure to meet you, sir. And I do have to apologize for one thing. When you was on the show and those F-16s were flying over, I didn't mean to buzz you like that. Sorry about that.
That was funny. I knew it was you.
Wow. All I can say right now is wow. When you said that, you just talking about the job and the health effects and the effects on the household and what have you. You just added a new meaning to the word slavery, and that's what it has always been about. All of America has been in slavery. But let me ask you this, because you struck a chord when you talked about mindset. I have been using a product for a few years, and this past year I started to try to market it, and I ran into that old mentality, the crab in the barrel mentality. Everyone is doing the same thing, and everyone is crawling over top of one another, what have you. And that mindset came for me in just the past couple of days, where I'm trying something different. and it seemed to be, in the past couple of days, I'm getting better results than I have since February. Translate that into the Word of God when we are trying to share the Word of God with others, okay? Again, you're in that barrel of crabs because everyone has that answer, believers in Christ and non-believers alike. And I'm trying to do something new in terms of getting the word out that the Lord Jesus Christ is soon to come. And I guess my question is this a fruitless battle? I mean, what do you do in the situation?
Well, that's a great question, and I guess there's two sides to the answer. The first answer is it's not fruitless because if you've been called to do it, that's what you've been called to do, and let him worry about the results. That's number one. I mean, never lay your head down and think, oh my goodness, I didn't do what I was supposed to do. That's not how coaching works. That's not how the military works. If a bunch of privates try to storm a hill and they're not successful, well, it was the general that didn't have the right strategy. And I think sometimes we blame ourselves for the ineffectiveness of certain campaigns. Now, with that said, there are things we can do to train ourselves to become the most effective that we can become. And in religion, again, we're getting to that most intimate part of people's lives. We're talking about their faith. And we have a tendency to sell religion based on whatever sold us.
Okay.
Right? I mean, we well, Jesus changed my life and he saved me from drinking. Well, I don't know this Jesus and I'm not a drunk. Why are you telling me this?
Okay.
So we have to reassess our speaking to other people. I actually did a complete show on this on somebody else's show on how to have a conversation to convey what you want the other person to hear, not what you want to hear yourself say. And when we look at how we can readdress that conversation and look at things like laddering and asking questions, then we start to break down those belief systems. Because as soon as you start attacking a belief, a wall is going to come up, period. And if you think about how you have your belief, it wasn't because somebody insulted a pre-existing belief. It was because at some point somebody said something or you discovered something that made you question what you already held as true. And it might have been painful, you might have cried about it, but you allowed the change to happen. So start asking questions, and the answers to those questions lead to your desired result.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. And also I added to that with prayer, because it's been my prayer here recently to be endowed with the wisdom on my dealings and others, and trying to convey that how time is short. But you enlightened that very well. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the call.
Vernon, thank you. You have a great night.
God bless. Have a great night, everybody. Have a blessed night. Take care now.
All right. That was Vernon, is a regular caller, a longtime listener, and a friend of the show. We're going to move on here. Area code 562. We're coming to you next. You're live on the Hagmann Report with Josh Tully. And that seems very scrambled. I'm putting that back on hold. Sorry about that, guys. 404. You're up next. You're live on the Hagmann Report.
404 going once, twice. Sorry, right. 404.
Last one here, 214. We're going to go to you. You're live on the Hagmann Report.
And, we've got,
wow.
I'll tell you what, we've got.
These are problems on I don't think these are phone problems because the people are still there on hold. They're not dropping off.
No. See, Josh, we have these gerbils. And if we fail to feed them in the morning, the power our equipment. This is sometimes it feels like amateur hour with what we've got, but we do the best with what we have, and frankly we've reached our average listening base right now, just to let people know, I think 74 countries, I think we heard 74 active listening. So you've got us beat, but a lot of people are hungry for information today, and a lot of people are on information overload. But I think you've really laid out a tremendous plan here, or a tremendous methods, giving us wonderful ways to cope, to act, and I think if we don't do this, it's on us now. I mean, really, everything you've said makes perfect sense. And failure to act. By the way, the same gentleman I mentioned about I talked about before also said belief is the driver of action. That's a pretty accurate statement, isn't it? Belief is the driver of action.
No.
No?
No, I don't think it is. I think the ability for conviction to be anchored to that belief. Because think about it. Why do people not succeed? Why are you not going into your neighborhood? Why are you not active? Because you believe it isn't going to work. So belief is the driver of inaction as well. And that's how powerful beliefs are.
Yeah, you can believe that, the sky is green. Or that's a bad example. You can believe you want something, but until you
believe you can't do it. Or,
right, exactly.
That's what he's... Okay.
And this is where the power of our minds, as he was talking about the living as a zoo animal, and Vernon mentioned the slavery through the way that the free market job system is, or not so free market more. But yeah, the belief is just one part. I mean, a lot of people believe a lot of things, but what their actions are based on are not so much their belief. It is the conviction behind that belief. And that is a very it's something that's not talked about. And you hit on a huge point there, Josh. I really appreciate that insight, as it really breaks down what human behavior is and how people react to certain things and why they do things the way they do. And that's very insightful.
Josh, I love our audience because they do find ways to communicate, whether it be, when everything falls apart, yet they still communicate. I have an email from Ron in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, new listener, is saying, please ask Josh what he believes to be the most important. I'm gonna shorten this up here. What do you believe the most important thing is facing us here in our country? What's the most important thing facing Americans in our country? And I shortened the paragraph down to a sentence. So,
I think the most important thing that we're facing is the lack of conviction, and I think your previous question segued into that perfectly, because all of us believe that we're going in the wrong direction. Congress, for goodness sakes, only has a 10% approval rating, so everybody of every political suasion, of every social economic background, everybody believes that we're going in the wrong direction. It's that lack of conviction and the lack of mindset that is the biggest threat we face. I mean, even if we go biblical with this, when God was about to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, what if I can find 10? Well, okay, what if I can just find 5? How about if I can just find 1? And it all came down to, will you repent? Do you know what you're doing is wrong? Yes. Okay, so you believe it, right? Yes. Now do you have the conviction to actually do something with that belief? And that's the biggest problem we have. Because when we started this show, that's exactly what we were talking about. We were talking about 350 million people obeying 8,000. That's just mathematically just ludicrous. But it's because we don't believe it. God said, hey, if you will repent, I will save your nation. So is this the last day? Could be. Could he stay his wrath for 100 years? He sure could. But again, it comes down to our conviction on that belief.
Very good. Very well stated, by the way.
What the heart really intends, not what so much we say or do, but what we really want in our hearts is a big factor in that conviction. And, people can say that they're Christian, people can say that they're atheist, but what you believe in your heart, if it's contradictory to what you're saying to other people, that plays a big factor also. The self-confusion that we see today, the lack of critical thinking, does this stem from a problem that has been generationally passed down from trinkets and toys and electronics and entertainment, or is this something that is new through these tools or systems in your mind?
Well, I think it's one of those things where it's a chicken and an egg, because we're at this point now where we're teaching it, and it's generational, and it's technology based, and then we're also teaching the technology, so it's starting to become generationally based. And I think it was Doug who brought up the point about this overwhelmingness of all this information. And we're seeking knowledge. We're no longer seeking wisdom. And the distinction between the two is so vast that it's the difference between freedom and slavery. There were genius engineers in Nazi Germany who were slaves. Yet there were wise people who fought for freedom, and they had an 8th grade education. And we are substituting belief and wisdom with just raw info. And a lot of us are thinking, well, if I just get enough information, then that's the key to happiness. Then that's the key to changing my actions, to changing my beliefs. And it's not true. Matter of fact, I'll take that a step further, and I'll say a lot of us use even conspiracy theories as crutches. Well, I can't have a successful family because of the Bilderberg. Or I can't live the life I want because there's fluoride in the water. And at some point, we've become captive to the idea of becoming captive. And I know that's kind of trippy, but it's true. So I think what we're at now is this place where we really have to get back to what we believe and then set those convictions.
All right. And again, it makes perfect sense. I have another question here, actually, from Ty, listening live from Singapore. Wow. Hi, Ty, from Singapore. Yeah. Wants to ask you, Josh, about your reliance. Again, I'm paraphrasing here. Do you see the reliance on, for example, iPhones, iPads, and what have you, as a bad thing, a good thing, or just it depends on how you use them type thing? And again, I'm kind of summarizing the question.
I think reliance is a bad thing. No, I think using them is fine. I'm using one to talk to you, and I'm glad I am, because if it touches one heart, then it's worth it. But I think right now we've become so reliant on the technology that we have abdicated the role of conveying the wisdom that usually came with the information. When in generations past, we could look at samurais in feudal Japan or knights in, the dark ages of Europe. Whenever you conveyed knowledge, you also conveyed teaching and wisdom on how to use that knowledge. And that is just gone. Now knowledge comes, in a one-paragraph Facebook post, and we have no wisdom on how to use this. We have no strategy. So, in a sense, we've become a bunch of 14-year-olds with the keys to a Ferrari. We're going to wreck this thing. And to take that even further, I think we need to get back to a place where we use as much traditional means as possible, even with the conveyance of information. The Kremlin has released that they're going back to typewriters and paper, and I think it's genius. Because in order to steal that secret, you literally have to break in a vault. So
I love it.
We need to reassess how we convey information, what information we convey, and are we teaching along with that conveyance to gain wisdom. The only difference between a lunatic and a genius is who he tells and how he tells it.
Okay. When you think of it, yeah, you're absolutely correct. The only difference between a lunatic and a genius is the method of conveyance of an idea, is what you're saying, right?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. I have another question here, emailed to me from Stephen. I'm sorry. Oh goodness, Stephen out of Memphis. Earlier in the show, you were talking about again. I'm reading here. Stephen wants to know this. He's stuck, basically, working 2 jobs, and his wife is working 1 job. He's done everything he can to lower his lifestyle. He wants very badly for his wife to be able to quit her job. How do you start when you're stuck with 2 dead-end jobs? This, according to Stephen from Memphis.
Sounds like Stephen has found the Dave Ramsey approach of eat beans and get a lot of jobs until you can get out of debt. That's really not the best way to do things. The best way to do things economically is to get ahead of expenditures and inflation. And now this is a fun topic that I could talk about forever. But the whole premise behind entrepreneurship is to get ahead of what you're spending. I mean, you have profit. And to keep it profitable so you can stay ahead of the rate of inflation. That's why the rich always appear to get richer, and in reality they're just staying ahead while the rest of us can't keep up. And in order to do that, we need to start a business. Now, the number one objection is, well, Josh, it always takes money to make money. And that's simply not true. If that were the case, there would have been the original $100 printed, and somehow we would all have to share it. So there's no such thing as it takes money to make money. You just have to think strategically how you're going to go about becoming self-employed. Now, if you are working 2 jobs, it might take a little bit of a risk. It might take, letting go of the leash that's holding you back and risking, being wild. But the wonderful thing is we know that what you're doing now is not working. So this mindset of settling for something that you know isn't working and then settling for it for the next 40 years has to change. Too often I hear stories of people, I'm working 2 jobs, my wife's working 2 jobs, but we just can't make the jump. Well, if you don't jump, what happens? You burn in the building. So jump anyway. And if you do it right and if you do it correctly, entrepreneurship is a great way to provide for your family. And I'll give you an example of it. It doesn't take money to make money. I use this one all the time. I was training a business in Seattle, and one of the employees came up to me and said, hey, I want to start a business too, but I don't have any money. And I said, okay, well, what are you good at? And this guy was good at drawing people. And I said, oh, this is easy, and we could have you in business by Tuesday. So I said, okay, well, what we're going to do is you need, I think it was $75 for the city vendor permit to be a business in the city, and he needed about $500 in supplies. And I said, we're going to go to an Italian pizzeria. You're going to tell that pizzeria that you need about $700, $500 to start your business. In exchange, you are going to draw caricatures of all these tourists coming into Seattle, and with every character drawing, you're going to hand them a coupon for the pizzeria. Now, this makes sense for the pizzeria because, hello, they're tourists. They don't know where to eat. So now you're handing them a place, hey, eat here. It's way better than the $40,000 they were spending in the newspaper. So this guy says, okay, let's do it. He starts his drawing business, drawing caricatures. Last time I talked to him, he's making almost 6 figures, works 4 days a week, and is happy as a lark. And it took $0.
Wow. That's simple. It's just kind of like this opening your mind up to new ideas, different ways of thinking, looking at the same problem from different angles, different perspectives, being creative, using ingenuity, our God-given ability to think for ourselves. This is fantastic. Josh, we're coming to the close of our program. I don't want to that and the our audio problems are I've been getting notices here. Our audio problems are creeping up on us. Let me give you the last word. Tell us. Go ahead and promote your radio. Tell us about your radio show again, your expansion, and give us some closing, encouraging, uplifting remarks, because this will, by the way, be downloaded many, many, many thousands of times via our archive in its entirety without any of the problems noticeable. So go ahead and tell us once again a little bit about your radio program, your expansion, and also your closing thoughts.
Well, first I want to thank you for allowing me to come on. I really do appreciate it. Again, I think you guys have a wonderful show, one of my personal favorites. People can find out more about my show. They can go to joshtully.com, JOSHTOLLEY.com. My show airs 9 to 11 Central Standard Time, Monday through Friday on stations all over the place. If it's not airing in your area, call your local station manager and say, hey, what's wrong with you? Get this show. And you can always, stream it live on the Internet. We are adding a third hour and a television side to the broadcast so people can actually watch us do the show, and they can find out all those updates on joshtully.com. We constantly do seminars, trainings. We take personal clients. So if any of this stuff made sense to you, if you're thinking, man, I want to fix my relationship, I want to fix my business, I want to fix my political campaign, whatever it is, definitely get in touch with us. You can do that also at joshtully.com. And then, a word of encouragement, because this is really about you. It's not about me. It's not about Doug. It's not about Joe. This is about you. And the word of encouragement is thank you so much for being some of the wisest people on the planet and knowing that you need to find the information. We talked a lot about how the information isn't all that you need, but you set yourself apart knowing that you at least needed to know it. You put yourself in the elite. Not the elite, warmongers or anything like that, but the elite in the people of the planet who recognize, hey, wait a second, I don't know the truth. Now, I don't know who you are. You could be 90 years old. You could be 30 years old in a wheelchair. You could be divorced, homeless, whatever. But I want to tell you, as long as there is breath in your lungs, you have the ability to make change. Everybody's heard that analogy of the starfish, where all these starfish are dying and this little girl's throwing them in, and somebody asks her, well, why are they doing it? Why bother? Most of them are going to die. And she says, well, it matters to this one. To me, I would rather make the difference in one person's life and go out of this life knowing I made that impact than to constantly be thinking about myself and impacting nobody. And I know you feel the same way, too, wherever you're listening to this show. So just take that and realize, you know what? You can accomplish greatness. Nobody can stop you. If you are a Bible believer, it says whoever, I had it on the tip of my tongue. Not only can you do all things through Christ who strengthens you, but you have God on your side. So remind yourself of that. However big the adversary seems to be, just remind yourself, hey, you know how this ends, and if he really wants it done, there's nothing that can stand in your way. Just continue to pursue knowledge, continue to pursue excellence in everything you do. Somebody once told me, Josh, the definition of hell is when you die meeting the person you could have been. And I got to tell you, I think about that every day of my life. I don't want to get to the end and think, wow, I could have touched that life, but I didn't. I could have changed that mindset, but I didn't. So just do everything you can. Start small. Start locally. Start with you. Keep listening to Hagmann and Hagmann. Start listening to Josh Tully, and just continue the fight, because you are special just because you're pursuing it.
Josh, thank you so much. I mean, I got to tell you, that last minute or so, I've actually got chills up my spine from what you said. Wow. I want to thank you for offering the encouragement, for the insight, the compass that people are looking for. And I believe, Josh, you're touching so many people by this broadcast, and of course your broadcasts every day. And I want to thank you for what you do, because you're one of our favorite talk show hosts, to be sure. And I want to say God bless you, my friend, for showing up or for being part of our program. Joe?
The knowledge and wisdom that you brought to the show tonight, and by everything else that you have been talking about, have imparted a huge amount of reaction from our audience, and it is all positive. they really understand what you're saying and the way you're saying it. In today's world, people don't usually understand one person so easily. People seem divided when they hear things. They hear what they want to hear, or however that works. But you speak to people in a way that is different, and I really appreciate your time. And your show is great. It is on GCN, Genesis Communication Network, 9 to 11 Central Time, 10 to noon Eastern Time.
The real time is 10 to... that's the real time.
That's right. That's right.
And I want to thank you for being a part of this show and for having me on your show, and I hope we can do this more often.
Oh, I do too. I hope to be both ways. You guys on my show, I on your show, because whenever we get together, the conversation that comes forth is just, I think it's wonderful. In all of my years listening to radio, I would have loved to have been a listener to conversations like we have.
Absolutely. And folks, think about that statement, too. I mean, put some thought into what Josh just said. The conversations that we just had. Conversations. That's what it's all about. And the knowledge. My goodness, Josh. And no wonder people pay you the big bucks to go speak to them. Man, I'll tell you, you are an incredible speaker, motivational speaker, incredible speaker, very wise man, and I want to thank you so much.
Just starting out, really. Opposed to where other people start late, but Josh, you started very young, 18, been an entrepreneur ever since, a successful one at that, and I want to congratulate you for that, and for your move, what you're doing, expanding your radio show. Undoubtedly, you will reach more people, and you will be helping more people, and we can't thank you enough for that.
Yeah. We'll cut you loose.
Well,
God bless you, my friend. Thank you
night,
so
guys.
very much for being part. Good night.
Bye.
Folks, that was Josh Tully, the Josh Tully Show. We're going to have a link directly on our website, directly to his radio program. I got to tell you something. I want to get that Quit Your Job or Die book by Josh Tully, just for the insight that would give me personally, from a different perspective. Because when he, Joe, when he said that, why, if your wife is so like the most important thing, why are you selling her out for $15 an hour? But see, it's just not that one nugget. That nugget represents so much more. And folks, you know what I'm talking about. But what a great guy, and it's been our pleasure to know him for a long time. Well, a year at least, anyway. He's a great host.
And he has a fantastic show. It was I had a great time being on there. You and me both went on there previously. Yeah. And you got to go back on there because he needs answers on Benghazi that he was asking questions to. Even call him on the off air or whatever.
Sure,
but
I'll do that.
He wanted to talk to you about Benghazi specifically. So,
and I'm going to apologize too, Joe. I've got about 10 emails and counting right now from people that are pretty angry that they have not been able to get through on our normal lines. Look, folks, we apologize. Some things are out of our control.
I'll tell you what, like I said earlier, we get indicators if something is wrong with our audio from at least three different places. If something goes off on BTR, we'll know on Skype, we'll know on BTR, and we'll know through another way. We had no indicators of anything wrong except people telling us that the sound went out, and then some people telling us they came back on and it went back to the beginning of the show.
Right.
And when odd things like this happen, it usually is an error inside the systems that are being used that are on the end of the, we'll say BTR, in this case, and it was not any mishaps on our part.
If I have 10, there are 100 or maybe even 1,000 more that are behind those. So,
but the archive will be available.
Yeah.
Immediately following the show. You can download it on iTunes. You can get it off of BTR page. You can download it right from there itself, and the sound should not go out at all. It should be a crystal clear, perfect audio. And it will also be up on our YouTube channel, Team K9. That's Team KNEIN.
Oh, just go to the HomelandSecurityUS.com and click on the YouTube channel.
Well, we don't talk about that enough. We don't promote our YouTube channel enough. We don't promote our Hagmann and Hagmann Report Facebook page enough.
Oh yeah, we have that too, right?
we do have that, and that's
and
where
Twitter.
We post our stories from the website. That's where we post our links for the shows. Also, using the social media just as a tool to promote these shows and getting the word out that we need to. And tonight was a very eye-opening show. Mr. Tully brought in a lot of information that was a different way of looking at things, and very insightful, breaking things down to their natural state, really.
Well, you and I have conversations before, after the show, sometimes even during the show. We don't. Sometimes we don't even listen to ourselves, No, but before and after the shows, we have conversations. Yeah, what can we, with all this information, what can we best offer people? And it's guests like this who make you, compel you to think in different ways, and
that's right. And I just want to say this: on Wednesday, we're going to have author Nolene Finch on, who has written a great book, A Fight for Innocence.
Yeah, I've got it right here. I apologize. Fight for Innocence. This
is about
a local author, local to us anyway, and
part of my family now.
Nolene Finch.
Right, it's my wife's aunt, and she wrote a book about trauma from ritualistic and non-ritualistic sex abuse in children and how it affects them and how to overcome it. A lot of people have been touched by this book.
Absolutely.
And have said that it is an amazing book. So, and she'll be on Wednesday.
I heard about this book. I went to a local bookstore and I heard this book from a local author, or it was featured in the local author section. I had no idea who this person was, and I was looking through it, and I thought, wow, this is some interesting concepts. And sure enough, so Wednesday is going to be a great show. Be sure for that. Folks, I want to tell you this. This just in, as if we didn't know this, the Treasury Department has admitted for the first time now, are you ready for this, that confidential tax records of several political candidates and campaign donors were improperly scrutinized by government officials. But you know what? Holder is saying, we're not going to prosecute any of these cases. Now, Joe, when I said we are a captured operation, or the country has been overtaken from within, what more proof do we need? If the Justice Department is not going to act like a Justice Department,
I can't hear you. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. I don't hear it. I don't see it. I live in my bubble. It's okay.
These disclosures, this is just another blow to the IRS and to Obama. But I've got to tell you, going back, and please, ladies and gentlemen, if nothing else today, and it sounds like I'm pimping my articles, and I apologize for that terminology.
You
promoting. Well, yeah, I am.
But there's cause behind it, as there are some very insightful.
Please, we've got to do a RICO action, a civil RICO action, and it's not that. And in fact, what I'll be doing tomorrow is contacting some Tea Party members from other states that perhaps might have been affected by the IRS, and urging them to find legal representation to file civil RICO suits against the agents themselves. We can do this. We can, in this case, we can. It's not that difficult. It's not that convoluted. It's a pretty straightforward case. And the civil, and the beautiful part about this, in case you missed the first part of the program, is the individuals behind this. For example, the agents. If you've ever been through a tax audit, or if you've ever dealt with the IRS, you've dealt with an agent of the IRS. You've got their name. I've dealt with the IRS on different matters. And if you have their name and their identification, you can actually file suit against those people themselves personally in their capacity working in that capacity under the color of authority. And what happens is they will quickly, and I can guarantee you, they will quickly roll over and say, oh, hey, it wasn't me, I'm just following orders, the Nuremberg defense, of course, and point to their supervisor. And, of course, you go up the line. You follow the breadcrumbs, the trail of breadcrumbs. And you see this, and in doing so, in addition to making that identification, you also uncover the criminality aspect. Now, that's a different matter altogether. But when these people are facing triple damages, because as it has been pointed out here, you've got with persons in positions of trust and operating under the color of authority, when they misuse their job or their office to deprive you of your civil, personal, or business rights, you can sue for damages. The result of this of such a suit is to bring into the light of day the perpetrators, and not only prosecute them, but to send a message to any of their cohorts. By the way, you can sue for triple damages, which also makes this very lucrative for the attorneys that are operating on your behalf. It's a very nice incentive. The motivation for law firms is right there. It's a civil RICO action. Now, is this the be-all and end-all? No, but it's an immediate solution, one that's manageable for this case. So we can look at these Drudge headlines like today and say, wow, okay, so there's an admission, but Holder's not doing anything. Well, the end around play. And I think Josh Tully would probably agree, because of using, your noggin for other than a hat rack is to think differently and to outsmart them at their own game. The civil RICO action, and RICO was specifically done for this or passed for this particular type of situation where you're not going after the person that you seemingly are going after, but you're going after the mastermind of the operation. And therein lies the rub. But Drudge has got a full page of links, as you pointed out, Joe, about the modern day lynching. I mean, all of this white noise.
It's feeding into the
frenzy.
Right.
Frenzy.
And that bothers me a lot.
Well,
not surprising, but it does bother me.
And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? In case you're wondering, Syrian rebels, they're siding with Trayvon.
And I think they found a chemical weapon stockpile with the rebels. But we're going to be covering that and a lot more tomorrow. We don't have any guests scheduled yet. I'm not sure if we will. I think we need a day to break down information.
I do.
Ourselves, and we will be back tomorrow.
We're going to be talking tomorrow. Don't forget this week, ladies and gentlemen, the downing of TWA Flight 800. What does that mean? Well, why would we even talk about that? Well, some of the same players that were involved in that are also involved in what's taking place today, and also the Vincent Foster homicide. That's, and I say homicide. Folks, I was at Fort Marcy Park. I didn't investigate the murder, but I was at Fort Marcy Park. I talked to the park police. In fact, Joe was with me when we talked to the park police. But we went down there I was down there right after they found Vince Foster's body. I'm going to tell you right now, it was a homicide. There are people that I'm in contact with that know a lot about this homicide that will not come on the air, but